No good deed goes unpunished. My mother used to say that, usually while bandaging my knees after I'd gotten into trouble defending someone smaller than me, someone weaker, someone who couldn't defend themselves. I'd thought she was being cynical, bitter, wrong. I understand now. Understanding came the day I pulled a drowning child from the river and looked up to find the Alphaking staring at me with eyes like molten gold, not with gratitude, but with suspicion, with calculation, with the kind of intensity that told me I'd just made the worst mistake of my life. The stories all promise the same thing, that heroism is rewarded, that saving a life creates an unbreakable bond, that courage lifts you up rather than drags you down. But stories are told by people who've never been powerless, who've never learned that sometimes the worst thing you can do is become important to someone who holds all the power. I'd saved the prince, and in doing so, I'd lost any chance of saving myself. Before we begin, if you love forbidden romance, enemies to lovers tension, and stories where courage defies impossible odds, you'll love my book Rejected by the Alpha, a glow-up revenge romance that will keep you reading all night. Link in the description below. Now, let's dive into tonight's story. Chapter 1. The Drowning. The river had no mercy that day. I'd come to understand that about water over the years, how it could look gentle, almost benevolent in the afternoon light, its surface catching gold from the sun like scattered coins. But beneath that pretty surface, currents moved with purpose and malice, ready to drag down anything foolish enough to trust the illusion of calm. I should have known better than to walk this close to the Serpent's Bend. Everyone knew the river turned treacherous here, where it curved around the ancient willows whose roots reached down like grasping fingers. But the tavern where I cleaned floors and washed dishes sat just beyond the tree line, and this path cut my morning walk by half. Time mattered when you were worthless, when every moment of your existence had to justify the space you took up in the world. The scream cut through the air before I saw anything. High-pitched, desperate, a child's voice swallowed by terror. My feet were moving before my mind caught up, branches whipping against my arms as I crashed through the undergrowth. The riverbank came into view, and there, being pulled downstream by the current, a small figure thrashed in the water. A boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old. His dark hair was plastered to his skull, one arm reaching up toward the sky, as if he could grab hold of the air itself and pull himself to safety. I didn't think. Thinking was a luxury for people who had something to lose. I kicked off my worn boots and dove. The cold hit me like a fist to the chest, stealing my breath, filling my nose and mouth with the taste of silt and old leaves. The current was stronger than I'd anticipated, furious, relentless, trying to pull me under and away. But I'd grown up near water. I knew how to read its moods, how to use its strength against itself. I angled my body, let the current carry me toward where the boy had gone under. 3 seconds, 5. My lungs began to burn. Then I saw him, a flash of small pale hands beneath the brown water, already going slack. I grabbed his shirt and kicked hard toward the surface. We broke through together, his weight a dead anchor in my arms. He wasn't breathing. His lips were blue, his eyes closed. But his chest was still warm, there was still time. The current tried to take us both, but I wrapped one arm around his torso and used the other to pull us toward the shallows. My feet finally found purchase on slick stones. I dragged us both onto the muddy bank and laid him flat. Water poured from his mouth when I turned him on his side. I pressed on his back, once, twice, and then he convulsed, coughing up river water in violent heaves. His eyes flew open, wide and golden. Golden. My stomach dropped. Shifter eyes. Not just any shifter, the kind of gold that meant alpha bloodline, royal bloodline. The boy's gaze fixed on me, confused and terrified, and I saw the moment he tried to shift. Nothing happened. His small face crumpled with effort, then with shame, and fresh tears mixed with the river water on his cheeks. "It's all right," I heard myself say, my voice rough. "You're safe now. You're Theron." The roar came from upstream, along with the thunder of multiple footsteps crashing through the forest. I looked up to see them emerging from the trees, 6 guards in the dark crimson uniforms of the royal house, their faces twisted with panic. And behind them, moving with a speed that seemed to bend the air around him, was the Alphaking himself. I'd never seen him this close before. Nobody like me ever got close to royalty. He was taller than the story suggested, his shoulders broad beneath the black coat that marked his station. His hair was dark as midnight, pulled back from a face that might have been handsome if it weren't so completely devoid of mercy. But it was his eyes that pinned me in place, the same molten gold as the boy's, but ancient, weighing, missing nothing. He moved past me as if I didn't exist, dropping to his knees beside the child. His hands, large enough to crush a man's skull, were gentle as they checked the boy over, tilting his chin up, feeling for his pulse. "Papa," the boy Theron whispered, and something in the Alphaking's expression cracked just slightly, just enough to make him look almost human. "I'm here." His voice was surprisingly soft. "You're safe now." "She saved me." Theron's small hand lifted, pointing at me where I still knelt in the mud, water dripping from my hair, my plain brown dress plastered to my skin. "The lady saved me." That's when those golden eyes turned to me. I should have looked away. Should have dropped my gaze to the ground where it belonged, shown the proper deference that might keep me alive through the next few minutes. But something in me, some reckless, self-destructive part that had never learned when to make itself small, met his stare head-on. I watched his nostrils flare slightly as he scented me. Watched the moment he understood what I was. Human. Not just human, only human. In a world where humans served and shifters ruled, where the ability to change forms marked you as worthy of respect, of rights, of basic dignity, I was nothing, less than nothing, and I'd just touched the Alphaking's son. "You pulled him from the river." It wasn't a question. His voice had gone flat, empty of the warmth he'd used with Theron. "Yes, Your Majesty." I forced the words out, forced myself to add the title even though it tasted like ash on my tongue. "How did you know he was there?" The question caught me off guard. I'd expected anger, maybe accusation had I pushed the boy and myself, hoping to be seen as a hero. That's what they'd think. That's what they always thought when someone like me did anything outside the narrow boundaries of our existence. "I heard him scream," I said simply. "I was walking to work. I didn't think. I just didn't think." He repeated my words slowly, as if tasting them for lies. "You just happened to be here. At the most dangerous bend in the river, when my son, who was supposed to be in his lessons with his tutors, somehow ended up in the water. Ice slid down my spine. He thought I was part of a plot. A kidnapping attempt, maybe, or worse. I work at the Copper Griffin Tavern," I said, hearing the edge of desperation creeping into my voice. "Ask anyone there. I take this path every morning. I would never." "Papa, she's telling the truth," Theron's small voice interrupted. He'd pushed himself to sitting, was clutching his father's arm with both hands. I snuck away. I wanted to see the river. I wasn't supposed to be here. Nobody knew. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Please don't punish her. She saved me." The Alphaking's jaw tightened. For a long moment, he just stared at me, and I had the uncomfortable sensation of being dissected, laid bare, every secret and shame exposed under that golden gaze. Then he stood, pulling Theron up with him. One of the guards immediately stepped forward with a blanket, wrapping it around the boy's shivering shoulders. "What's your name?" the king asked. "Catherine. I didn't add a family name. I didn't have one worth speaking. Catherine." He tested it, his tongue making it sound like something sharp. "You will come with us." Terror spiked through me. "Your Majesty, that wasn't a request." He turned to his guards. "Escort her to the palace. See that she's properly clothed and fed. She is not to leave the grounds until I've decided what to do with her." Decided what to? I started to stand, but one of the guards was already at my side, his hand firm on my elbow. Not quite gentle, but not quite rough either. Confused, maybe, about how to treat someone who just saved the heir to the throne but was also clearly beneath his station. "You saved my son's life." The Alphaking's voice was quiet now, almost dangerous in its softness. "That creates a debt. And debts, Catherine, must be paid." He scooped Theron into his arms and turned away, striding back toward the forest path. The other guards fell into formation around them, leaving just two to flank me. I looked down at my bare feet in the mud, at the soaked dress that clung to my skin, at the sorry state of my existence made suddenly visible in the harsh light of royal attention. I'd saved a life today. Somehow, I had the terrible feeling I'd just sealed my own fate instead. Chapter 2. The Gilded Cage. The palace rose from the hillside like a crown of white stone and silver spires, so beautiful it almost hurt to look at directly. I'd seen it from a distance before. Of course, everyone in the lower city had. It dominated the skyline, a constant reminder of the hierarchy that governed our lives. Shifters above, humans below, alphas at the top, and the rest of us scrambling for whatever scraps fell through the cracks. But seeing it up close was different. The walls seemed to glow in the afternoon light, carved with intricate patterns that must have taken decades to complete. Gardens sprawled across the grounds, meticulously maintained, full of flowers I couldn't name. Fountains sang with clear water, so much water, wasted on beauty, when people in the lower city sometimes went days without enough to drink. The guards led me through a side entrance, away from the grand front gates where I assumed important people arrived. We moved quickly through corridors that seemed to stretch forever, past servants who stopped and stared at my bedraggled appearance, my bare, muddy feet leaving prints on floors so clean they reflected the light like mirrors. No one spoke to me, not the guards, not the servants we passed. I was a curiosity, perhaps, or a problem to be solved. Either way, I didn't warrant conversation. They finally stopped at a door in what seemed to be a residential wing, far from the main palace, I guessed, but still more luxurious than anywhere I'd ever been. One of the guards knocked, and a moment later, a woman opened it. She was older, maybe 50, with steel-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that assessed me with the efficiency of someone used to managing problems. "This is the one?" she asked the guards. "His Majesty's orders. She's to be cleaned, clothed, and kept here until he sends for her." The woman's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Pity, maybe, or concern. "I see. Leave her with me." The guards departed without another word, and I was left standing in the doorway, dripping river water onto yet another expensive floor. "Come in," the woman said, not unkindly. "Before you catch your death. I'm Margot. I manage the household staff." She paused. "What's your name, girl?" "Catherine." "Well, Catherine, let's get you sorted." She led me through a sitting room into a bathing chamber that made me stop and stare. I'd never seen anything like it. A large copper tub, already steaming with hot water as if she'd known I was coming. Shelves lined with bottles and soaps that probably cost more than I made in a month. Soft towels stacked in neat piles. "Strip out of those wet things," Margot said, already moving to add something to the water that made it smell like lavender. "We'll burn them. They're ruined anyway." I hesitated. The dress was ruined. Yes, but it was the only one I owned besides my other work dress, currently hanging in my tiny room above the tavern. Margot caught my expression, and her voice softened slightly. "You'll be provided with new clothes. The king's orders." I wanted to argue that I didn't need the king's charity, that I could manage fine on my own. But that would be a lie, and we both knew it. So I peeled off the sodden dress and stepped into the bath. The heat was almost painful against my cold skin, but I sank into it anyway, watching the water turn brown with river mud. Margot worked efficiently, pouring water over my hair, working some kind of soap through the tangles. Her hands were brisk, but not cruel. "You really pulled Prince Theron from the Serpent's Bend?" she asked after a while. "Yes. That's a dangerous current. People have drowned there." "I know." She was quiet for a moment, working the soap into a lather. "You're human." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Yes. Can't shift at all?" "No." Another pause. "And you jumped in anyway. For a shifter child you didn't know." I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. What else would I have done? Let him drown? The fact that he could shift, and I couldn't, seemed irrelevant when he was a child struggling in the water, his small lungs filling with the river that wanted to claim him. Margot made a soft sound that might have been approval or disbelief. I couldn't tell which. When I was clean, she wrapped me in a towel so soft it felt like a sin against my skin, and led me back to the sitting room where she'd laid out clothes. Not servants' clothes, I realized with growing unease. The dress was simple, yes, dark blue wool, well made but not ostentatious. but it was far too fine for someone of my station. "I can't wear that," I said. "You'll wear what you're given." Margot's tone left no room for argument. "The king wants you presentable." "This is presentable." I dressed slowly, my fingers fumbling with the laces. The dress fit reasonably well, though it was a bit loose in the shoulders. Margot produced stockings and soft leather shoes that were far more comfortable than my old boots had ever been. When I was dressed, she sat me down and began working through my hair with a comb, gently untangling the wet snarls. "What's going to happen to me?" I finally asked, unable to bear the silence any longer. Margot's hands paused for just a moment. "I don't know. He said there was a debt." "Yes, I heard," she resumed combing. "Saving the heir's life is no small thing, but you're also human, which complicates matters." "Complicates them how?" She didn't answer directly. Instead, she said, "The king is a complicated man. He doesn't always act the way you'd expect, but he's fair, in his way. He'll make a decision, and then you'll know." That wasn't remotely reassuring. When my hair was as neat as it was going to get, Margot stood back and looked me over with a critical eye. "That'll do. Now, you're to stay in these rooms until summoned. There's food in the cabinet if you're hungry. Don't try to leave, the guards have orders." "I'm a prisoner, then." Her expression softened just slightly. "You're a guest. There's a difference." "Is there?" She didn't answer that either. She just gave me one last measuring look and left, closing the door behind her with a soft click. I was alone. The silence pressed in around me, broken only by the faint sound of water dripping from my hair onto the expensive carpet. I looked around the rooms, the sitting area with its comfortable chairs and small table, the glimpse of a bedroom through another doorway, everything clean and bright, and utterly foreign. This was wrong. All of it was wrong. I should be at the tavern right now, scrubbing floors and hauling water, and trying to make myself useful enough that they wouldn't turn me out. I should be invisible, insignificant, safe in my smallness. Instead, I was here, in the palace, wearing clothes that cost more than I'd earn in a season, waiting for the Alphaking to decide my fate. I moved to the window and looked out over the grounds. From here, I could see the training yards, where young shifters practiced combat in both human and wolf form. Beyond that, the gardens stretched toward the outer walls, and past those, the city sprawled down the hillside toward the river. My river. The one I'd crossed every day without thinking about it. The one that had nearly killed a prince this morning. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, and closed my eyes. "What have I done?" I whispered to the empty room. No answer came. But somewhere in the palace, I knew, the Alphaking was deciding what debt was owed for a saved life, and whether someone like me, broken, human, worthless, in all the ways that mattered, could possibly be payment enough. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky, painting the room in shifting shades of gold and amber. I tried to eat the food Margot had mentioned, bread and cheese and fruit that tasted better than anything I'd had in months, but my stomach was twisted too tight to manage more than a few bites. I paced. Saturday, paced again. Tried to imagine what the king might want from me. Money? I had none. Service? I was already a servant, and a poor one at that. Silence? An agreement to never speak of what happened, to disappear back into obscurity, and let the story be told without the complication of a human hero? That seemed most likely. He'd give me some coins, make me swear never to speak of the prince's near drowning, and send me away. Back to the tavern, back to my small room and smaller life. The thought should have been a relief. It wasn't. The door opened without warning, and I spun around to find a different guard standing in the doorway. Not one of the ones who'd brought me here. This one was older, with gray threading through his dark hair and a scar across his jaw that spoke of old battles. "His Majesty will see you now," he said, his voice neutral. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Where?" "His private study. Come with me." I followed him back through the maze of corridors, trying to memorize the path and failing completely. Everything looked the same, beautiful, pristine, utterly disorienting. We climbed a set of stairs, turned down another hallway, and finally stopped at a heavy wooden door carved with wolves running beneath a full moon. The guard knocked once, then opened the door, and gestured for me to enter. I stepped inside, and the door closed behind me with a finality that made my breath catch. The study was smaller than I'd expected, lined with bookshelves that stretched from floor to ceiling. A fire burned low in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the room, and behind a massive desk covered in papers and maps, the Alphaking sat, still wearing the same black coat from this morning, though he'd changed out of his wet boots. He didn't look up immediately, just kept reading whatever document was in front of him, a pen in his hand, his expression unreadable. I stood there, uncertain whether I should speak or wait, whether I should bow or curtsy, or simply remain still, and hope not to draw his attention. Finally, he set down the pen and raised his eyes to meet mine. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. I sat, my back rigid, my hands clasped in my lap to keep them from shaking. He studied me for a long moment, the same weighing gaze from the riverbank, and I had the uncomfortable sensation that he was reading me like one of the documents on his desk, cataloging my weaknesses, my fears, everything I'd tried so hard to hide. "Theron as well," he said finally. The healers examined him. "No lasting damage. He'll be fine." Relief washed through me, unexpected in its intensity. "I'm glad." "You should be. If he'd died, you would have died as well." The words were delivered calmly, matter-of-factly, and somehow that made them more chilling than if he'd shouted them. I started, but he held up a hand. "I know. I've had your story verified. The tavern keeper confirms you walk that path every morning. The tutors confirm." Theron slipped away from his lessons. "You're not part of any plot." He leaned back in his chair. "You're simply a human woman who happened to be in the right place at the right time, and who was foolish enough to risk her own life for a child she didn't know." "It wasn't foolish," I said before I could stop myself. "He was drowning, and you can't shift, can't heal faster than a human pace. If that current had taken you under, you'd be dead right now." His eyes narrowed. "So yes, foolish." I bit back the dozen responses that wanted to spill out. He was the king. I was nothing. Arguing would only make things worse. "However," he continued, "foolish or not, you saved my son. That creates a debt that must be acknowledged. Here it comes," I thought. "The payment, the dismissal." "I've thought about this carefully," he said, "about what would be appropriate. Gold seemed insufficient, land you could do nothing with. A title would be meaningless and insulting to those who've earned such things through generations of service." Each word felt like a stone dropping into water, sending ripples through my understanding of what was about to happen. "So I've decided on something else." He stood, moving around the desk to stand in front of me, and I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. "You will stay here, in the palace, under my protection." The room tilted. "I don't understand." "It's quite simple. You saved the heir to the throne. That makes you valuable and vulnerable. There are those who would see your action as embarrassing, a human rescuing a shifter prince. They might seek to silence that embarrassment. Then let me go home," I said quickly. "I won't tell anyone what happened. I'll disappear. I'm good at disappearing." "No." The word was final. "You'll stay here, where I can ensure your safety, where your presence will remind my son of what true courage looks like, regardless of what form it takes." He paused. "And where I can decide what to do with you." I'm not a thing to be decided about," I said, the words escaping before I could call them back. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in those golden eyes. "In this kingdom, Catherine, everyone is a thing to be decided about, especially those who catch the attention of the king." He returned to his chair. "You'll be given quarters. Work, if you desire it, though you won't be required to labor as you did at the tavern. You'll dine with the household staff and be treated with the respect due to someone who saved the prince's life. And if I refuse, you can't." He picked up his pen again, already turning his attention back to his papers. "The debt is mine, not yours. I decide how it's paid. And I've decided you stay." I stared at him, this man who held absolute power over my life, who could command my presence or my death with equal ease. Who was calling this protection, this gift, when it felt like chains wrapping around my wrists? "For how long?" I finally asked. He didn't look up. Until I determine the debt is satisfied. And when will that be? Now he did look up, and there was something in his expression I couldn't read, something almost like curiosity. I have no idea, he said softly, but I suspect we'll both know when the time comes. He dismissed me with a gesture, and the door opened behind me, as if the guard had been listening for his cue. I stood on shaking legs and turned to leave. But his voice stopped me at the threshold. "Catherine." I looked back. "Thank you," he said, and for just a moment, the king disappeared and I saw only a father whose son had nearly died. "For saving him. Whatever else happens, know that I am grateful." I nodded, not trusting my voice, and left. The guard led me back through the corridors, but I barely saw them now. My mind was racing, trying to understand what had just happened. I'd saved a life, and in return, I'd lost my freedom. The Alphaking had refused to let me go, and somehow, I had the terrible suspicion that this was only the beginning. Chapter 3. The Weight of Gold. My new quarters were in the East Wing, Margot explained as she led me there the following morning. Not the servants' quarters, but not quite the guest suites either. A strange in-between space, like everything about my presence in the palace acknowledged but not quite accepted, valued but not quite trusted. The rooms were larger than the temporary chamber I'd spent the night in. A bedroom with an actual bed, not a straw mattress on the floor. A small sitting area with a window that overlooked the gardens. A writing desk with paper and ink that I couldn't imagine having any use for. "You'll take your meals in the staff dining hall," Margot said, setting down a bundle of additional clothing on the bed. "Breakfast at dawn, lunch at midday, dinner at sunset. If you need anything, pull that cord and someone will come." She pointed to a braided rope hanging near the door, and I had to suppress a laugh. The idea that I could summon a servant, that anyone would come running because I'd pulled a cord, it was absurd. "What am I supposed to do?" I asked. "All day, I mean. The king said I didn't have to work, but I can't just sit here." Margot's expression softened slightly. "That's for you to decide. Some of the court ladies spend their days in needlework or music. Others walk the gardens. You could visit the library, if you can read." I could read. My mother had taught me before she died, insisting that even humans needed education, even if the world didn't think we deserved it. But I'd never had access to more than a handful of books, whatever I could borrow from the tavern keeper's small collection, read by candlelight after my work was done. "I can read," I said quietly. "Then that's something." She moved toward the door, then paused. "A word of advice, girl. Keep your head down, don't cause trouble. The king's protection only extends so far, and there are those in this palace who won't take kindly to a human being given such privilege. I never asked for privilege. No, but you have it now, whether you wanted it or not. Best learn to navigate it carefully." She left, and I was alone again with my thoughts in my new prison. The first 3 days passed in a haze of disorientation. I attended meals in the staff dining hall as instructed, sitting at the long tables with chambermaids and kitchen workers and stable hands. They were polite but distant, their conversations dying when I approached, resuming in whispers after I'd passed. I caught fragments: "The human who saved the prince," "King's pet project," "won't last a month." I tried to make myself useful, offering to help with tasks, but was gently redirected each time. "You're not staff," a chambermaid named Iris told me not unkindly. "You're something else. Something else. Neither servant nor guest, neither shifter nor quite free." I spent hours in the library, a cavernous room filled with more books than I'd ever imagined existed. I ran my fingers along their spines, reading titles about history and philosophy and distant lands I'd never see. I pulled down volumes at random and lost myself in their pages, grateful for the escape they provided from the strangeness of my new reality. It was there, on the 4th day, that Prince Theron found me. I didn't hear him approach. He moved with the unconscious grace all shifters possessed, even the young ones. I only became aware of his presence when a small voice said, "You're the lady from the river." I looked up from my book to find him standing a few feet away, his golden eyes wide and curious. He was dressed in fine clothes now, his dark hair neatly combed, looking every inch the prince he was, but there was something uncertain in his expression, almost shy. "I am," I said carefully, not sure what protocol demanded. Should I bow? Call him Your Highness? I settled for closing my book and giving him my full attention. I wanted to thank you, he said, taking a step closer. For saving me. Papa said I should have done it sooner, but the healers wouldn't let me leave my rooms until today. You don't need to thank me. I'm just glad you're all right. He moved closer still, peering at the book in my hands. What are you reading? I showed him the cover. A collection of folk tales, from the Northern Territories. Can you read well? There was genuine curiosity in his voice, not condescension. Yes, my mother taught me. My tutors teach me reading too, but they're boring. He wrinkled his nose. They make me read histories and treaties and things about governance. Never stories. Despite myself, I smiled. Histories can be stories, if you look at them the right way. Really? Really, every war, every treaty, every rise and fall of kingdoms, they're all full of people making choices, facing impossible odds, trying to survive or thrive or change the world. That's what stories are made of. Theron's face lit up with interest. I never thought of it like that. We talked for a while longer, about books and stories, and the difference between learning something because you had to, and learning it because you wanted to. He was bright, quick-minded, asking questions that showed real thought behind them. And there was something else, a loneliness that I recognized, because I carried it too. Theron. The voice cut through our conversation like a blade, and we both turned to see the Alphaking standing in the library doorway. He'd come silently, and I wondered how long he'd been there, listening. His expression was unreadable as he looked between his son and me. Papa. Theron's face brightened. The lady was telling me about stories and histories. She's very clever. I'm sure she is. The king's eyes fixed on me, and I felt that familiar sensation of being assessed, measured, found wanting or interesting, I couldn't tell which. But you have lessons, and you're late. Can I come back? Theron asked, looking at me hopefully. To talk more about stories? I glanced at the king, uncertain. This felt like dangerous territory, spending time with the prince, forming any kind of relationship with him. That's up to your father, I said carefully. The Alphaking was quiet for a long moment, his gaze still locked on mine. Then, unexpectedly, he nodded. If Catherine is willing, you may visit her in the library. But only after your lessons are complete, and only for an hour each day. Theron beamed. Thank you, Papa. He ran to his father, who rested a hand briefly on his son's shoulder before sending him off with one of the guards who'd appeared in the doorway. And then, it was just the two of us, alone in the vast library. The king stepped inside, and I stood automatically, clutching the book to my chest like a shield. You're good with him, he said, surprising me. He's easy to talk to, he's curious. He's lonely. The king moved to the window, looking out over the grounds. Being the heir comes with isolation. Other children, even other young shifters, treat him differently. They see the crown before they see the boy. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. You treat him like a child, the king continued. Not a prince. I suspect that's rare for him. I treat him like a person, I corrected quietly. Because that's what he is. The king turned to look at me, and something flickered across his face. Amusement, maybe, or respect. You don't fear me much, do you? I'm terrified of you, I admitted. But fear doesn't change what's true. He made a sound that might have been a laugh, though it held no humor. Most people let their fear change everything. They tell me what they think I want to hear, show me what they think I want to see. He paused. You don't do that. Would you prefer I did? No. The answer came quickly, firmly. No, I wouldn't. Silence stretched between us. Not quite comfortable, but not entirely hostile either. Why am I really here? I asked suddenly, the question that had been building in me for days finally breaking free. You said it was for my protection, but I don't believe that. You could have given me gold, sent me far away where no one would find me. Instead, you brought me here, into your home, where everyone can see me, where I'm a constant reminder of. I stopped, uncertain how to finish. Of what? He prompted. Of weakness. A shifter prince saved by a human. That can't be the story you want told. He studied me for a long moment, and I had the uncomfortable sensation that he was deciding something important. You're right, he said finally. That's not the story I want told. He moved closer, and I forced myself not to step back. The story I want told is different. It's about courage, regardless of form. About worth beyond the ability to shift. About a kingdom that values all its people, not just those born with power. I stared at him. That's not how this kingdom works. No, it's not. His eyes held mine. But perhaps it should be. And perhaps having you here visible, valued, proof that humans can be heroes too, is the first step toward changing that story. You're using me, I said, the realization settling in my stomach like a stone. I'm not here because you're grateful. I'm here because I'm useful. Yes. He didn't deny it, didn't try to soften it. But that doesn't make the gratitude less real, or the debt less genuine. You saved my son. Everything else, the politics, the symbolism, the message it sends, that's secondary to that simple truth. I didn't know whether to be angry or relieved by his honesty. At least he wasn't pretending this was purely altruistic. At least he was giving me the truth. Sharp-edged as it was. What if I don't want to be a symbol? I asked. Then you'll be an uncomfortable symbol, he said, but you'll be a symbol nonetheless. The moment you pulled Theron from that river, you became part of something larger than yourself. There's no going back from that. He moved toward the door, then paused. My son likes you. That's rare and precious. Don't take it lightly. I don't, I said quietly. I know what loneliness looks like. Something in his expression shifted, softened, maybe, though it was hard to tell. Yes, I suspect you do. And then he was gone, leaving me alone with my borrowed books and my new understanding of exactly what kind of cage I'd been placed in. Not a cage of bars and locks. A cage of purpose and politics. Of being needed for what I represented, rather than who I was. I sat back down, but the words on the page blurred and refused to make sense. Instead, I stared out the window at the gardens below, at the beauty and privilege that surrounded me, and wondered how something that looked so much like salvation could feel so much like drowning. The days fell into a pattern after that. Mornings in the library, reading until my eyes ached. Afternoons when Theron would visit, and we'd talk about stories and histories, and all the questions that filled his quick mind. Evenings alone in my quarters, watching the sun set over the city, and trying not to think about the tavern, about my small room, about the life I'd left behind. I saw the Alphaking rarely glimpses in corridors, his voice carrying from the training yards, once across the dining hall when he took a meal with his advisors. He never approached me again, never sought me out, but I could feel his attention like weight, like I was being watched and measured even when he wasn't present. The other servants grew slightly warmer toward me, though there was still distance there. Iris, the chambermaid, occasionally sat with me at meals and shared palace gossip in careful, edited portions. The head cook started saving me the best portions of bread, claiming they'd just burn otherwise. Small kindnesses that reminded me not everyone saw me as an intruder. But there were others, nobles visiting the court, higher-ranking shifters who looked at me with barely concealed contempt. A human, eating at the king's table, even if it was the servants' table. Living in palace quarters, spending time with the prince. I could see the calculation in their eyes, the resentment, the certainty that I was overstepping boundaries I shouldn't even be able to see. One evening, 2 weeks after my arrival, I was returning from the library when I encountered a woman in the corridor. She was beautiful in the way shifter women often were, tall, elegant, her bearing screaming of noble birth. Her hair was pale gold, her eyes a striking green, and she wore a gown that probably cost more than the tavern I used to work at. She stopped directly in my path, forcing me to halt. "So you're the famous Catherine," she said, her voice smooth and cold. "The human who saved our prince." I gave a small curtsy, uncertain of protocol. "My lady, Lady Sienna," she corrected, "of House Thornbrook. I'm here visiting the court." Her eyes raked over me, cataloging every inadequacy. "Tell me, how does it feel to be the king's newest project?" The word dripped with insinuation, and heat flooded my face. "I don't know what you mean, my lady. Don't you?" She stepped closer, and I caught her scent, something floral and expensive. "The king takes a special interest in a common human girl, brings her into his home, allows her proximity to his son. One does wonder what services you provide to earn such privilege." Understanding hit me like a slap. She thought I was that the king and I were. "It's not like that," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I saved Prince Theron's life, that's all." "Of course it is." Her smile was sharp. "And I'm sure your presence here has nothing to do with the king's appetites. After all, everyone knows shifters don't involve themselves with humans except for, well, base purposes." She swept past me, leaving a wake of perfume and poison, and I stood frozen in the corridor, my hands shaking with humiliation and rage. Was that what people thought? That I was the king's mistress? His plaything? I made it back to my quarters and locked the door, pressing my back against it, as if I could shut out the implications of what Lady Sienna had suggested. The king had never touched me, had barely even looked at me except with that same assessing gaze he probably gave everyone. There was nothing between us except a debt and a political calculation, but that didn't matter, did it? Perception was its own truth in places like this. I was human. He was the Alphaking, and I lived under his protection in his palace. Of course people would talk. Of course they'd assume the worst. I sank down onto the floor, my back still against the door, and for the first time since arriving at the palace, I let myself cry. Not from fear or sadness, but from the sheer exhaustion of navigating a world that had no place for someone like me, where every kindness was suspect, every protection came with strings, and even gratitude could be twisted into something ugly. I'd saved a life, and somehow, I was still drowning. Chapter 4. I didn't sleep that night. Lady Sienna's words circled in my mind like vultures, picking at every moment of the past 2 weeks, reframing them through her poisonous lens. The king's decision to keep me here, his presence in the library, the way he'd looked at me with that unreadable expression. Base purposes. I pressed my palms against my eyes until I saw stars. It wasn't true. I knew it wasn't true, but knowledge didn't protect against gossip, and gossip in a place like this could be more dangerous than any physical threat. When dawn finally came, I was hollow-eyed and raw. I skipped breakfast, unable to face the dining hall, and the stairs I was certain would follow me now. Instead, I went to the library early, hoping to lose myself in pages before Theron's visit. But I couldn't concentrate. The words blurred together, meaningless. I kept seeing Lady Sienna's knowing smile, hearing the implication in her voice. "You look terrible." I jerked my head up to find Theron standing in the doorway, his young face creased with concern. "I didn't sleep well," I said, trying to smooth my expression into something less haunted. He came closer, tilting his head in that distinctly canine way. "You smell sad. And angry." I'd forgotten that shifters could scent emotions. Another vulnerability I couldn't hide. "I'm fine, Theron. Really. You're lying." He sat down across from me, his golden eyes too knowing for a 7-year-old. "Did someone hurt you?" "No, not physically." "Then how?" I hesitated. "How did you explain court politics to a child? How did you tell a prince that his father's kindness toward you had been twisted into something ugly by people who saw only status and power?" "Sometimes," I said carefully, "people say things that hurt, without ever raising a hand. They make assumptions about you based on what you are, not who you are." Theron frowned. "Because you're human?" "Yes. That's stupid." Despite everything, I almost smiled. "Maybe, but it's how the world works. Then the world is stupid too." He said it with such conviction, such absolute certainty, that something in my chest loosened slightly. "Your father is trying to change that," I said. "I think, in his way. Papa is very good at changing things." Theron leaned forward. "He changed the laws about human laborers last year, made it so they couldn't be beaten for minor mistakes. Some of the nobles were angry about it, but he did it anyway. I hadn't known that. The tavern keeper had never mentioned it, though perhaps the changes hadn't reached the lower city yet, or perhaps they had. and I'd been too buried in my own survival to notice larger shifts. "He's a good king," I said. "He's lonely too," Theron said quietly. "Like me. Like you." The observation was so unexpected, so perceptive, that I didn't know how to respond. "My mother died when I was born," Theron continued, his voice matter-of-fact in the way children discussed tragedy they'd never fully felt. "Papa loved her very much. He doesn't talk about her, but I can tell. He looks at her portrait sometimes, in his study, when he thinks no one is watching." My throat tightened. I'd assumed the Queen had died, given there was no mention of her, but hearing it confirmed and understanding the weight the king carried shifted something in my perception of him. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "It's okay. I never knew her, so I can't miss her. But Papa does. And I think that's why he's—" Theron paused, searching for words. "Why he's careful. With people. He doesn't let anyone close because he's afraid they'll leave too." "Theron, you shouldn't tell me these things." "Why not? You're my friend." The word landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through everything I thought I understood about my place here. "I'm not sure that's appropriate," I said gently. "I'm human, and you're the prince. And that's stupid too," Theron interrupted. "You saved my life. You talk to me like I'm a person instead of a title. You make the histories interesting, and you never get impatient when I ask questions. That makes you my friend." He said it with such finality, such unwavering certainty, that I felt something crack in the armor I'd built around myself. "All right," I said, my voice rough. "Friends." His smile was blinding. We spent the next hour as we usually did, discussing the book I'd been reading, a collection of myths from the Eastern kingdoms. But something had shifted. There was an ease between us now, a trust that hadn't quite been there before. When his tutor came to collect him for afternoon lessons, Theron paused at the door. "Catherine, don't listen to the mean people. Papa chose to keep you here because you're brave and good. That's all that matters." He left before I could respond, leaving me alone with a throat full of unshed tears and a strange, fragile warmth in my chest. I didn't expect to see the Alphaking that evening. I was in the gardens, walking the paths as the sun set, and painted everything in shades of amber and rose. It was becoming my habit this quiet hour before dinner when the grounds were mostly empty, and I could pretend, just for a moment, that I was free. "Catherine." His voice came from behind me, and I turned to find him standing on the path, still in his formal attire from whatever meetings had occupied his day. He looked tired, I realized. There were shadows under his eyes that I hadn't noticed before. "Your Majesty," I curtsied, remembering protocol even as my heart hammered. "Walk with me," he said, and it wasn't quite a command but wasn't quite a request either. I fell into step beside him, acutely aware of the impropriety, the Alphaking and a human woman, alone in the gardens, as darkness fell, more fuel for the gossip fires. We walked in silence for a while, following the winding paths between flowering bushes I couldn't name. "Theron tells me you've been teaching him to see stories and histories," he said finally. "I wouldn't say teaching, just offering a different perspective. He's excited about his lessons for the first time in months. His tutors are bewildered." There was the faintest hint of amusement in his voice. "Apparently he asked them today to explain the Treaty of Ashford, as if it were an adventure story." Despite my tension, I smiled. "I hope they obliged." "They tried. According to Theron, they failed miserably." He paused at a fountain, watching the water catch the last of the light. "You're good for him. I wanted you to know that." "He's good for me too," I admitted. "He reminds me that kindness still exists in the world." The king turned to look at me then, really look at me, and I saw something flicker in his expression. "You've encountered unkindness here." It wasn't a question. Of course he knew. He probably knew everything that happened in his palace. "Nothing I can't handle," I said carefully. "That's not what I asked." I met his gaze, saw the expectation there. He wanted the truth, even if it was uncomfortable. "Lady Sienna," I said quietly. She implied things. "About why you've kept me here, about what services I might be providing to earn my place." His jaw tightened, the only visible sign of his anger. "I see. It doesn't matter," I said quickly. People will talk regardless of the truth. I know nothing inappropriate has happened. That's enough. It's not enough. His voice had gone cold, deadly quiet. She insulted you. And by extension, she insulted me and my judgment. Please don't, I started, but he cut me off. Don't what? Defend your honor? Correct malicious gossip? He stepped closer, and I caught his scent, pine and smoke and something wild underneath. You're under my protection, Catherine. That means something. It means I'm a symbol, I said, Lady Sienna's poison still working in my veins. A political tool. You said so yourself. I said you were useful. I didn't say you were only useful. His eyes locked onto mine. You saved my son. That makes you precious beyond any political calculation. And anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me. The intensity in his voice, in his gaze, made my breath catch. This wasn't the calculating king speaking. This was something raw, more personal. Why? I whispered. Why does it matter what they say about me? He was quiet for a long moment, and I watched something war in his expression, control against impulse, king against man. Because, he said finally, I know what it's like to be misunderstood. To have your every action analyzed and twisted by people who will never see you as anything but what they want you to be. He paused. And because my son considers you a friend, which means you're under the protection of this house in truth, not just in name. It was a careful answer, a political answer, but underneath it, I sensed something else, something he wasn't saying. I have a question, I said suddenly, surprising myself. If you'll permit it, ask. Why did you really keep me here? Not the official reason, not the political message, the real reason. He studied me for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I couldn't let you go. Why not? I don't know. The admission seemed to cost him something, but when I saw you on that riverbank, dripping wet and defiant, having just risked everything for a child you didn't know, I knew if I let you walk away, I'd spend the rest of my life wondering what I'd lost. The words hung between us, heavy with implications neither of us was ready to examine. That's not a good enough reason to keep someone prisoner, I said softly. No, it's not. He turned back to the fountain. But I'm the king, and I took what I wanted. That's what kings do. Is it what good kings do? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I've never claimed to be good, only necessary. We stood there in the gathering dark, two people caught in something neither of us had intended, bound by a debt that was starting to feel like something else entirely. I should go, I said finally. Dinner will be served soon. Catherine. He caught my wrist as I turned, his touch gentle despite his strength. Ask me something. Anything. A question only you would think to ask. I looked down at his hand on my wrist, then back up at his face. Why? Because I want to hear how your mind works. Theron isn't wrong, you see things differently. I want to understand how. It was such an odd request, so unexpected from someone who held absolute power. But there was genuine curiosity in his eyes, and something else. Loneliness, maybe. The same loneliness Theron had named. All right, I said slowly. Answer me this. What can be promised but never kept, given but never held, and broken without ever existing? He blinked, clearly not expecting a riddle. Where did you learn that? My mother. She loved riddles. Said they taught you to think sideways, to see past the obvious answer to the truth underneath. I pulled my wrist gently from his grasp. So? Can you answer it? He frowned, thinking. I could almost see his mind working through possibilities, discarding them, searching for the logic. Trust, he said finally. No. Hope. No. Then what? I smiled, just a little. If I told you, it wouldn't be a riddle anymore. You'll have to figure it out yourself. Something sparked in his eyes, surprise, maybe, or delight at being challenged. You're not going to tell me. Not tonight. I stepped back, putting distance between us. But if you solve it, Your Majesty, then you'll understand something about how I see the world. I left him there in the garden, standing beside the fountain, with a frustrated expression that was almost boyish in its intensity, And for the first time since arriving at the palace, I went to bed feeling something other than trapped. I felt seen. The next few days brought a subtle shift in the palace dynamics. Lady Sienna departed suddenly, her visit cut short by the king's suggestion that she return to her holdings. The whispers said he'd been coldly furious during their final audience, though he'd made no public accusations. But the message was clear: speak against those under his protection, and you'd find your welcome at court very short indeed. The other nobles grew more careful around me after that. Not friendly, but cautiously respectful. As if I was something they didn't understand but had learned not to underestimate. Theron's visits to the library continued, but now he'd sometimes bring his father with him. The king would sit nearby, ostensibly reviewing documents, but I'd catch him listening to our conversations. Once, when I was explaining how the fall of the Western Empire could be seen as a tragic romance between two rival houses, I looked up to find him watching me with an expression I couldn't decipher. "You still haven't solved it," I said one evening when we found ourselves alone in the library again, Theron having been called away by his tutors. "The riddle?" He set down his papers. "I've tried 17 different answers." 17? I couldn't help my smile. "You've been counting?" "I've been obsessing," he admitted. "It's infuriating. Every time I think I have it, the answer doesn't quite fit." "Maybe you're thinking too literally. Then give me a hint." That would defeat the purpose. He stood, moving around the table to stand in front of me. "You're enjoying this." "Immensely." And I was. There was something delightful about watching the most powerful man in the kingdom be confounded by a simple riddle. "One hint," he said. "Please." The please surprised me. Kings didn't say please, especially not to humans. "It's something everyone makes," I said softly, "but no one can hold." He stared at me, his golden eyes intense, searching. We were standing too close. I could feel the heat of him, catch his scent, see the way his pupils dilated slightly as he looked at me. "A promise," he breathed. "The answer is a promise." "Yes, can be promised but never kept because promises are broken." His voice was barely above a whisper now. "Given but never held because you can't physically grasp a promise. Broken without existing because a promise is just words, just intention, until it's fulfilled or betrayed." "Yes," I said again, and my own voice had gone rough. "What does that tell me about how you see the world?" I swallowed hard. "That I understand the difference between what people say and what they do. That I know words are cheap and actions are what matter. That I've learned not to trust promises because they're too easy to break." Something shifted in his expression, pain maybe, or recognition. "You've been hurt by broken promises," he said. "Haven't we all?" "Yes." He reached up slowly, giving me time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. "But some of us still try to keep them, even when it's hard, even when it costs us." His hand lingered against my cheek, his thumb brushing my skin so gently I barely felt it. My heart hammered in my chest, and I knew I should step back, should put distance between us, before this became something it couldn't be. But I didn't move. Neither did he. "Catherine," he said, my name rough in his throat. "Your Majesty?" A guard appeared in the doorway, and we sprang apart like guilty children. "The council is assembled. They're waiting for you." The king's expression shuttered closed, the vulnerable man disappearing behind the mask of the ruler. "Thank you. Tell them I'll be there momentarily." He waited until the guard departed, then looked back at me. "I should go." "Yes," but he didn't move immediately, just stood there, looking at me as if trying to memorize something. "The riddle," he said finally. "May I ask you another?" "When?" "Tomorrow." "Same time." He moved toward the door, then paused. "And Catherine?" "I always keep my promises. Even the ones I haven't made yet." He left, and I sank into the nearest chair, my legs suddenly unable to hold me. What was happening? This thing between us, this strange, careful dance we were doing, it couldn't be real. He was the Alphaking. I was human. There were laws, customs, hierarchies that made any real connection impossible. But the way he'd looked at me, the way his hand had felt against my skin, the way my entire body had leaned toward him like a flower toward sun. I pressed my hands against my face, and tried to remember all the reasons this was impossible. But for the first time in my life, impossible didn't feel like the end of the conversation. It felt like the beginning. Chapter 5. The Chambers. The next day, Theron arrived at the library with an unusual request. "Papa wants to know if you'll join us for dinner," he said, bouncing slightly on his toes. "Not in the staff hall. In his private chambers. Just the three of us." My stomach dropped. "Theron, I don't think. Please." His golden eyes were wide, hopeful. "It's lonely, eating with just Papa. He barely talks during meals because he's always thinking about kingdom things. But when you're around, he's different. More present." The idea of dining alone with the king in his private chambers, no less, felt dangerous. After last night, after that moment when his hand had lingered on my cheek, and the air between us had felt charged with something I couldn't name, adding intimacy felt like courting disaster. But how could I say no to Theron's eager face? "If your father truly wants me there, then yes," I said carefully. "But are you sure this is appropriate?" "Papa suggested it," Theron said firmly. "So it must be appropriate. He's the king. He makes the rules." That logic was both flawless and terrifying. That evening, a servant I didn't recognize came to collect me from my quarters. She led me through corridors I'd never traversed, deeper into the private wings of the palace where only family and intimate household staff were permitted. We stopped at a set of double doors carved with intricate wolf motifs. The servant knocked once, then opened the door and gestured for me to enter. I stepped inside and stopped, my breath catching. The chambers were nothing like I'd expected. I'd imagined something grand and cold, full of the formal trappings of royalty. Instead, this space felt almost lived in. Yes, there was luxury thick carpets, quality furniture, a fireplace large enough to stand in, but there were also books scattered on tables, papers covered in Theron's childish handwriting, a wooden wolf figurine abandoned on the mantel. It felt like a home, not a showpiece. "Catherine." Theron appeared from another room, running toward me with unchecked enthusiasm. "You came." I said I would. "I know, but sometimes adults say things and don't mean them." He grabbed my hand, tugging me further into the room. "Come see. Papa had them set an extra place for you." He pulled me toward a dining area, where a table had been set for three. Nothing ostentatious, simple plates, no excessive silverware, food already laid out in serving dishes that smelled divine. Through the windows behind the table, I could see the sun setting over the city, painting everything in gold. "You're here." I turned to find the king standing in a doorway I hadn't noticed, and my heart did something complicated in my chest. He'd changed from his formal attire into something simpler, a plain shirt, dark trousers, his hair loose around his shoulders instead of tied back. He looked younger like this, less like a king, and more like just a man. A father preparing to have dinner with his son, and with me. "Your Majesty," I curtsied, suddenly painfully aware of my own simple dress, my unadorned hair. "Please," he said, moving into the room. "In here, it's just Alex." Titles feel excessive when we're sharing a meal. Alex, his name. I'd heard it before, of course, but always attached to King or His Majesty. Hearing it alone, intimate, felt like being given something precious. "I'm not sure I can do that," I admitted. "Try." He pulled out a chair for me at the table, between where he and Theron would sit. "Please." I sat, my hands folded in my lap to keep them from shaking. This was madness. This was breaking every rule of propriety I'd ever learned. But Theron was already climbing into his own chair, chattering about his lessons that day, and Alex was serving food onto plates with the casual ease of someone accustomed to doing things for himself. And somehow, impossibly, it felt natural. "I hope you're hungry," Alex said, setting a plate in front of me loaded with roasted vegetables and some kind of meat in a rich sauce. "The kitchen tends to over-prepare when I tell them I'm having guests. This is more food than I'd normally eat in 3 days," I said, without thinking, then winced. That was too honest, too revealing of where I'd come from. But Alex's expression softened. "Then eat as much as you want, and know that there's always more." The meal passed in a strange, comfortable rhythm. Theron dominated the conversation at first, telling us about his day with the enthusiastic detail only children could manage. But gradually, the conversation shifted, became more substantial. "Tell Papa about the Eastern Empire," Theron urged around a mouthful of bread. "About how it fell because of the love story." "Theron, I'm sure your father knows his history better than I do." "I know the facts," Alex said, leaning back in his chair with a glass of wine. "But I'm curious about your interpretation. Indulge me." So I told the story as I'd told Theron, not as a dry recitation of dates and battles, but as a tragedy. Two royal houses, unified by a marriage that was supposed to bring peace. A crown prince, who loved his wife desperately, who trusted her above all his advisors, and the wife's brother, ambitious and ruthless, who fed his sister intelligence she unwittingly passed to her husband, intelligence that was carefully curated to lead the empire into strategic disasters. By the time the prince realized his wife had been used against him, the damage was done, I said, watching the light fade outside the windows. The empire was collapsing. His advisors demanded he execute her as a traitor. But he couldn't. He loved her too much. So instead, he abdicated, gave up the throne, and went into exile with her. And the empire fell completely within 5 years. Alex finished quietly. Because the next ruler was weak and the vultures smelled blood. Yes. But the prince and his wife lived another 40 years together in peace. They had children, built a life. I met his eyes. History calls him a coward and a fool, but I wonder if he was just a man who chose love over power. And if that makes him weak or brave. Brave, Theron said immediately. Love is scary. Choosing it is brave. Alex's gaze hadn't left mine. And you, Catherine? What do you think? I think, I said slowly, that it depends on whether you believe power is worth having if you have to lose yourself to keep it. Something flickered in his eyes, recognition, maybe, or pain. Spoken like someone who's never held power, or someone who's seen what it costs. I countered softly. The air between us felt charged again, heavy with things unsaid. Theron, oblivious to the undercurrents, was already launching into another story about his tutors, breaking the tension. After dinner, Alex suggested Theron show me his collection of wolf figurines. Apparently, he'd been collecting them since he was small. We spent an hour in Theron's room, listening to him explain the significance of each one, where it came from, which was his favorite, and why. Watching them together, Alex sitting on the floor beside his son, his large hands, gentle, as he helped position the figurines in some elaborate scene. Theron was constructing. I saw a side of the king that no one in the kingdom probably ever witnessed. He was patient, attentive, genuinely interested in his son's imaginings. He made different voices for the different wolves, played along with Theron's elaborate stories, and when Theron accidentally knocked over half the display, Alex just laughed and helped him rebuild it. "You're good with him," I said quietly when Theron had darted off to get another figurine from a shelf. "He's easy to be good with," Alex replied, his eyes following his son with unmistakable affection. "He's the best thing I've ever done. The only purely good thing, perhaps. That can't be true. Can't it?" He looked at me then. "I'm a king, Catherine. I make decisions every day that hurt people. I enforce laws that are unjust because changing them would cause chaos. I maintain a hierarchy that elevates some and crushes others, because dismantling it entirely would lead to civil war." His voice was low, intense. "There's very little that's purely good in ruling. But Theron, he's innocent, untainted by all of this, and I want to keep him that way as long as possible." "You can't," I said gently. "He's the heir. Eventually, he'll have to learn what it costs." "I know." The words sounded like they hurt. "But not yet. Not while I can still protect him from it." Theron returned then, and the moment passed. But it stayed with me, that glimpse of the man beneath the crown. The father terrified of failing his son. The ruler who carried the weight of impossible choices. When Theron finally started yawning, Alex declared it bedtime. Theron protested, but half-heartedly, already rubbing his eyes. "Will you come back?" he asked me as Alex steered him toward his bedroom. "For dinner again?" I glanced at Alex, uncertain. "If Catherine is willing," he said, "then yes. This can be a regular occurrence." I'd like that. I found myself saying, and meaning it. After Theron was tucked in a process that involved Alex reading from a storybook until Theron's eyes finally closed, the king walked me back toward the main part of his chambers. "Thank you," he said when we were alone again. "For coming tonight, for being patient with him, for seeing him as a child first. That's not something you need to thank me for. Perhaps not, but I'm grateful nonetheless." He moved to a side table where a decanter of amber liquid sat. "Would you stay for a drink? Or would that be too inappropriate?" Everything about tonight had been inappropriate by conventional standards. One more transgression seemed almost inconsequential. "One drink," I said. He poured 2 glasses and handed me one, then gestured toward the seating area near the fireplace. We sat in chairs angled toward each other, close enough to talk comfortably but not quite close enough to touch. "You promised I could ask you another riddle," he said after we'd sat in comfortable silence for a moment. "I did. Then here it is. What can fill a room but takes no space, can be heard but never spoken, and grows stronger the more you try to hide it?" I considered the riddle, turning it over in my mind. It was good, better than I'd expected. "Clever. Silence," I said. "When something important goes unsaid, when the absence of words becomes louder than any conversation." His eyes held mine. "Yes, that's what you're asking me, isn't it? About the silence between us. About all the things we're not saying. Perhaps." He took a slow sip of his drink. "Or perhaps I'm just returning the favor. You gave me a riddle that revealed how you see the world. I'm giving you one that shows how I see this. This, whatever is happening between us." He set down his glass. "Because something is happening, Catherine. We both know it." My heart hammered. "It can't happen. You're the king. I'm human. There are laws." "Laws," I wrote. "Laws I can change. Social customs that would destroy us both. Your nobles already gossip. If anything actually happened between us, let them gossip." His voice was fierce. "Let them talk. I've spent my entire life making decisions based on what others thought. What was politically expedient. What would maintain stability. And it's made me into someone I barely recognize. Someone cold and calculating and alone." He stood, moving to the fireplace, his back to me. "And then you appeared. This human woman who jumped into a river without thinking, who speaks to my son like he matters beyond his title, who looks at me like I'm a man instead of a monarch, who challenges me with riddles, and makes me think about things I've been avoiding for years. Alex." His name felt strange on my tongue, intimate and dangerous. "I know all the reasons this is impossible," he continued, still not looking at me. "I know what it would cost politically. I know the scandal it would cause. I know that my nobles would revolt, and the other kingdoms would see it as weakness, and everything I've built could crumble." He turned then, and the look on his face stole my breath. "But for the first time in 7 years since my wife died and left me alone with a kingdom and an infant son, I want something for myself. Not for the crown, not for the succession, just for me." I stood because sitting felt impossible, moved toward him because staying away felt worse. "What do you want?" "I don't know yet." He reached out, his hand hovering near my face but not quite touching. "But I think it starts with this. With honesty. With admitting that when I see you, something in me that's been dead for years stirs back to life. You barely know me. I know you're brave and kind and clever. I know you value truth over comfort. I know my son trusts you, and Theron's instincts about people are never wrong." His hand finally made contact, cupping my cheek. "And I know that when I'm near you, I remember what it feels like to want something beyond duty. I should pull away. Should remind him of all the reasons this was impossible. Should protect us both from the inevitable disaster this would become. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned into his touch, let my eyes close for just a moment. "I'm terrified," I whispered. "So am I. You're the king. You're not supposed to be afraid of anything." "Then I'm a poor king. Because right now, standing here with you, I'm more afraid than I've been in years." His thumb brushed my cheekbone. "Afraid I'll do something that hurts you. Afraid I'll let you go and regret it forever. Afraid that this feeling is real, and afraid that it's not." I opened my eyes, met his golden gaze. "Ask me another riddle." "What?" "Ask me another riddle." Not to answer now, but to think about. To give us both time to figure out what this is. Understanding dawned in his expression, followed by something that looked like relief. You're giving us a reprieve. I'm giving us a chance to think clearly, without. I gestured between us, at the charged air, the proximity, the way my entire body was leaning toward his. Without this clouding our judgment. He nodded slowly, then stepped back, giving me space to breathe. All right, here's your riddle. What begins with fear, survives on faith, and ends with either freedom or ruin. I stared at him, understanding the true question underneath. You want me to figure out what we're doing, what this could become. I want you to decide if it's worth the risk, he said quietly. For both of us. Because once we cross certain lines, Catherine, there's no going back. And I need to know you understand what you'd be choosing. And what would I be choosing? Me. This life. The scrutiny and the gossip and the constant political maneuvering. Being seen as a weakness, as something to exploit or destroy. Never being fully accepted, always walking the line between two worlds and belonging fully to neither. He met my eyes. I won't lie to you about what this would cost. It would be hard, possibly impossible, and I need you to know that before we take another step forward. The honesty of it, the way he was laying out the brutal reality instead of making false promises, made my throat tight. The riddle, I said, my voice rough. Give me time to answer it. How much time? I don't know. As long as it takes to understand what I'd be choosing, what we'd both be risking. He nodded, and I saw relief in his expression. Then take your time. There's no pressure, no expectation, just think about it. And when you have your answer, or when you're ready to talk more, you'll know where to find me. I moved toward the door, needing distance, needing air, needing space to think. But I paused at the threshold and looked back. The answer to your riddle about silence, I said. It's not just about things unsaid. It's about fear. About being afraid that if you speak the truth, it will change everything. Yes, he said softly. And sometimes change is terrifying because you don't know if what comes after will be better or worse than what you have now. But staying silent guarantees nothing changes at all. Exactly. I held his gaze for one more heartbeat, then slipped out the door before I could do something foolish. Like stay, like tell him that I already knew my answer to his riddle, had known it the moment he'd touched my face with such careful tenderness. Like admit that I was already falling toward ruin, and I couldn't bring myself to care. Chapter 6. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange limbo. I continued my routine mornings in the library, afternoons with Theron, evenings alone in my quarters. But twice a week, I joined them for dinner in Alex's private chambers. Those evenings became the anchors of my existence, the moments I found myself counting down to with an anticipation that terrified me. We didn't speak of that night, of what he'd said, what he'd offered, the riddle that hung between us like a promise or a threat. Instead, we talked about safer things. Theron's progress in his lessons, interesting passages from books I'd been reading, the small politics of managing a kingdom that Alex would share in carefully edited versions. But underneath the surface conversations, something grew, an awareness, a pull. I'd catch him watching me with an expression I couldn't name. He'd lean closer than necessary when pointing out something in a book. Our fingers would brush when passing dishes at dinner, and the contact would linger a heartbeat too long. Theron noticed, I think. Children always noticed. But he seemed delighted by it, chattering about how happy it made him that his two favorite people were becoming friends. Friends, such an inadequate word for what was building between us. I still hadn't answered his riddle, partly because I was afraid of my own answer, partly because once I spoke it aloud, everything would change, and I wasn't sure either of us was ready for that change. But the universe, it seemed, had its own timeline. I was in the library late one afternoon, so absorbed in a text about ancient treaty negotiations that I didn't hear anyone approach until a voice said, "You're always here." I looked up to find a man I didn't recognize standing a few feet away. He was tall, well-dressed in the manner of nobility, with dark hair shot through with silver and eyes that assessed me with cold calculation. "The library is open to all residents of the palace," I said carefully, marking my place and closing the book. Residents. Such a generous term for someone in your position. He moved closer, and something in the way he carried himself set alarm bells ringing in my mind. Tell me, what exactly is your position? The king has been remarkably unclear about your purpose here. I saved Prince Theron's life. His Majesty offered me protection and hospitality in gratitude. How convenient. The man circled around to the other side of the table, effectively trapping me in my seat. 3 weeks of protection. That seems excessive for a simple rescue, doesn't it? I wouldn't know. I'm not familiar with royal protocols. No, you wouldn't be. You're human. You shouldn't be familiar with anything that happens in this palace. His voice was pleasant, conversational, which somehow made the words more menacing. And yet here you are, taking meals with the king, spending private time with the heir, living in guest quarters reserved for foreign dignitaries. If you have concerns about my presence, perhaps you should address them with His Majesty. Oh, I intend to. He leaned forward, bracing his hands on the table. But first, I want to understand what game you're playing. What you hope to gain from this arrangement. I'm not playing any game. Everyone plays games in this palace, girl. The only question is whether you're aware of it or whether you're just a pawn being moved by someone else. Before I could respond, another voice cut through the library. Lord Brennan, I wasn't aware you'd returned to court. Alex stood in the doorway, his posture deceptively casual, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the dangerous glint in his golden eyes. Lord Brennan straightened immediately, his expression shifting to one of practiced deference. Your Majesty, I arrived this morning. I was just introducing myself to your guest. How thoughtful. Alex's voice was pleasant, and that pleasantness was more frightening than any anger would have been. Though I believe Catherine and I had plans this afternoon, if you'll excuse us. It wasn't a suggestion. Lord Brennan's jaw tightened, but he bowed. Of course, Your Majesty. Perhaps we might speak later about some concerns the Northern Lords have raised regarding— Later, Alex interrupted. Still pleasant, still deadly. I'm sure you understand. Lord Brennan departed with one last cold glance at me, and I felt suddenly exposed, vulnerable, like I'd just had an encounter with a predator and escaped only by luck. Alex waited until the footsteps faded, then crossed to where I sat. Are you all right? Who was that? Lord Brennan, head of one of the most powerful families in the Northern Territories. Alex's expression was grim. And one of my most vocal critics regarding policies that favor humans. My stomach dropped. He thinks I'm your mistress, political tool, weakness to exploit. Take your pick. Alex pulled out the chair beside me and sat, suddenly looking exhausted. I knew there would be pushback to your presence here. I didn't expect it to turn hostile this quickly. Maybe I should leave. No. The word was sharp, immediate. That's exactly what he wants. To intimidate you into disappearing so he can claim the king is weak, that he bends to the will of humans, that I'm unfit to rule because I— He stopped himself, jaw clenching. Because you what? Because I care about you. The admission hung in the air between us. Because in 3 weeks, you've become important to me and to Theron, and that makes you a target for anyone who wants to undermine my authority. I stared at him, my heart pounding. Alex, this is exactly why. I know. He scrubbed a hand over his face. I know all the reasons this is dangerous. But I can't. He looked at me then, and the raw emotion in his eyes made my breath catch. I can't let them drive you away. I won't. Even if it costs you politically? Even then. That's foolish. Probably. A bitter smile touched his lips. But apparently where you're concerned, I'm quite good at being foolish. Before I could respond, rapid footsteps echoed in the hallway, and a guard burst into the library, his face pale. Your Majesty, forgive the intrusion, but— He swallowed hard. Prince Theron is missing. The world tilted. Alex was on his feet instantly. What do you mean missing? He was in his lessons. His tutor stepped out for a moment, and when he returned, the prince was gone. We've searched his usual hiding spots, but— How long? 20 minutes, Your Majesty. 20 minutes. Anything could happen in 20 minutes. Mobilize the guard. Search the entire palace. Alert the gates no one enters or leaves without my explicit permission. Alex was already moving toward the door, his voice steady despite the fear I could see in his eyes. And someone find Margot. She knows his hiding places better than anyone. The guard ran to obey, and Alex paused at the threshold, looking back at me. Stay here, stay safe. I can help search. Please. The words stopped me. I can't worry about you and Theron both. Please, Catherine. Stay here. Then he was gone, and I was left alone in the library with my racing heart, and the terrible knowledge that something was very wrong. Theron didn't run away. He was a good child. Obedient. Happy here. If he'd disappeared, it wasn't because he'd chosen to leave, which meant someone had taken him. I tried to obey, tried to stay in the library like Alex had asked. But after 30 minutes of sitting with growing dread, I couldn't anymore. I slipped out into the corridors, following the sounds of organized chaos, guards running, servants being questioned, doors being thrown open, and rooms searched with increasing desperation. No one stopped me. No one even noticed me in the commotion. I found myself retracing paths I'd walked with Theron, trying to think like a 7-year-old boy who loved stories and wolf figurines and asking questions. Where would he go? What would catch his interest enough to make him leave his lessons? And then, I remembered something. A conversation from 2 weeks ago, when Theron had been telling me about the palace's secret passages. Old smugglers' routes, from when the palace had been a fortress during the border wars. He'd been fascinated by them, had begged his father to show him, but Alex had said they were too dangerous, that they were sealed off. But what if they weren't? I ran toward the older section of the palace, the parts that predated the current structure. Down forgotten corridors, past locked doors, until I found what I was looking for, a section of wall that looked solid, but had a slight gap at the bottom, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. I pushed, and the wall gave way with a grinding sound, revealing a narrow passage beyond. Theron? I called into the darkness. No response. I should go get help. Should tell the guards what I'd found. But that would take time, and if Theron was down here, hurt, or lost, or worse. I grabbed a lamp from a nearby sconce and stepped into the passage. The air was cold and stale, the passage twisting down into darkness. I moved as quickly as I dared, calling Theron's name, praying I'd hear his voice respond. Then I heard it. A small, frightened whimper. Theron. I ran toward the sound, the lamp swinging wildly, throwing grotesque shadows on the stone walls. I found him huddled in a widening of the passage, his arms wrapped around his knees, his face streaked with tears. His shirt was torn, and there was blood on his hands. Catherine, he sobbed, and I dropped to my knees beside him. I'm here. You're safe now. What happened? A man he told me he'd show me the secret passages. Said it was okay, that Papa had given permission. Theron's voice broke. But then he locked me down here. Said I deserved to know what darkness felt like. That shifters who couldn't shift were worthless anyway. Rage, pure and incandescent, flooded through me. Who was the man? I don't know. I'd never seen him before. He had dark hair with silver in it, and he smelled mean. Lord Brennan. It had to be. Can you walk? I asked, forcing my voice to stay calm. I think so. I tried to get out, but the walls, they all look the same, and I got lost, and then I fell and... He looked at his bloodied palms. I hurt my hands on the stones. It's okay. I'll get you out. I helped him to his feet, noting the way he favored his left ankle. Can you put weight on that foot? He tried and winced. It hurts. Of course it did. Probably twisted when he fell. I looked at the passage stretching back the way I'd come, then at Theron's tear-stained face. He was too big for me to carry easily, but I'd manage. I had to. All right, climb on my back, hold on tight. But you're human, I know. But I'm also stubborn. Now climb on before I change my mind. He wrapped his arms around my neck, his legs around my waist, and I stood slowly, adjusting to his weight. He was heavier than I'd expected, and the return journey was going to be brutal. But I'd jumped into a river for him once before. I could do this. I started walking. one hand holding the lamp, the other supporting Theron's weight. The passage seemed longer than it had coming down, the darkness pressing in from all sides. My legs burned, my back ached, my lungs struggled with the thin air, but I kept moving. "Catherine?" Theron's voice was small against my ear. "Yes?" Why did the man say those things? About shifters who can't shift? My heart clenched. I'd hoped he wouldn't understand Lord Brennan's implications. Some people are cruel. They use others' differences against them to feel powerful. But I can shift. I just haven't yet because I'm young. Papa says it'll happen when I'm ready. Then that man was wrong. And cruel. And you should forget everything he said. It's hard to forget mean things. I know. I adjusted my grip on him. But you're strong. Brave. I wasn't afraid at first. The man seemed nice. That's how the cruel ones work. They seem nice until they have you where they want you. I could see light ahead, the opening I'd come through. But you're safe now, and your father is going to make sure that man never hurts anyone again. We emerged from the passage into the corridor, and I had to stop, my legs shaking from exertion. I lowered Theron carefully to the ground just as running footsteps thundered toward us. Alex appeared around the corner, flanked by guards, his face a mask of barely controlled terror. When he saw Theron, something in his expression cracked completely. "Papa!" Theron cried. And despite his injured ankle, he limped toward his father. Alex caught him, sank to his knees, crushed his son against his chest with a ferocity that spoke of a parent's worst nightmare barely averted. I saw his shoulders shaking, saw the way his hands trembled as he held Theron, and had to look away from the raw emotion on his face. "You're all right," Alex was murmuring, his voice rough. "You're safe. He pulled back, took in Theron's injuries, the torn shirt, the bloodied hands, and his expression went deadly cold. "Who did this?" "A man. He locked me in the passages, but Catherine found me. She carried me out, even though I'm too heavy and she's human," and Theron's words tumbled over each other. Alex's eyes snapped to me, and I saw a dozen emotions flicker across his face too quickly to catalog. Then he stood, still holding Theron, and moved toward me. "You went into the passages alone," he said quietly. "Yes. They're unstable. Parts have collapsed. You could have died. But I didn't, and neither did he." He stared at me, and I watched him struggle with something: anger that I'd risked myself, gratitude that I'd found his son, fear over what could have happened. "You saved him," he finally said. "Again. He's my friend. What else would I have done? Most people would have fetched the guards, waited for someone qualified. Most people aren't desperate, and they don't understand what it's like to be trapped in darkness by someone who wants to hurt you." I met his eyes. "I do." Understanding dawned in his expression, the recognition that my willingness to go into those passages alone came from my own experiences with cruelty, with being made to feel worthless. "Your Majesty." One of the guards cleared his throat. "The prince needs the healers." "Yes." Alex seemed to shake himself. "Summon them immediately, and find Lord Brennan. I want him in the throne room within the hour." "Lord Brennan, Your Majesty?" The guard looked confused. "Theron, can you describe the man who hurt you?" Alex asked gently. Theron did, haltingly, and I watched recognition dawn on the guards' faces, followed by shock. "Bring him to me," Alex said, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Now." The guards scattered, and Alex looked back at me. "Come with us, please, I need." He stopped, swallowed hard. "I need you there." So I followed them through the palace, to the royal chambers, where healers were already assembling. I stood in the corner while they examined Theron, cleaned his wounds, wrapped his sprained ankle, watched Alex refuse to leave his son's side, holding Theron's hand through every painful moment. And when the healers finally declared Theron would be fine, just needed rest and time to heal, I saw Alex's control finally shatter. He pressed his forehead to his son's and breathed like a man who'd been drowning and had just broken the surface. "Papa, don't cry," Theron said, though his own voice was thick with tears. "I'm okay now. Catherine saved me. I know." Alex's voice was barely above a whisper. "I know she did." He looked at me over Theron's head, and what I saw in his eyes made my breath stop. Not just gratitude, not just relief. Something far more dangerous. Something that looked like love. Chapter 7. Lord Brennan was brought to the throne room in chains. I stood in the gallery, with the other witnesses, nobles summoned by royal decree, guards who'd been part of the search, servants who'd heard the commotion, everyone who needed to see what happened when you threatened the heir to the throne. Alex sat on the throne in full royal regalia. The black and silver coat that marked his station. The crown that caught the light like captured stars. He looked every inch the king, cold and remote, and absolutely merciless. Theron stood beside him, his ankle wrapped, his small hand clasped in his father's. Alex had insisted on it, despite the healer's protests that Theron should rest. He needs to see this, Alex had said quietly. He needs to understand that actions have consequences, even for the powerful. Lord Brennan was forced to his knees before the throne. His expensive clothes were rumpled, his hair disheveled, but his expression remained defiant. Lord Brennan. Alex's voice carried through the throne room, cold as winter frost. You stand accused of conspiracy to harm the crown prince, of luring him into dangerous passages with false promises, of abandoning him in darkness with the intent to cause suffering or death. How do you answer these charges? I answer that they're fabrications, Brennan said, his voice steady. The word of a frightened child against that of a lord who has served this kingdom for 30 years. The boy was exploring on his own and got lost. I had nothing to do with it. Theron, Alex said gently, looking down at his son. Do you recognize this man? Theron stepped forward, his young face serious. Yes, Papa. He's the one who told me he'd show me the passages, who said you'd given permission. You're certain? Yes. Theron's voice didn't waver. I remember his smell, and his voice, and the way his eyes looked when he locked the door. Brennan's jaw tightened. The child is confused, traumatized. Children make poor witnesses. Perhaps, Alex said, but we have other evidence. Guards found the passage door unlocked with your personal seal on the lock mechanism. Care to explain how that seal came to be there if you had nothing to do with my son's disappearance? Brennan's face paled slightly, but he recovered quickly. My seal was stolen weeks ago. I reported it to the palace administrator. Interesting. Because I just checked with the administrator, and no such report exists. Alex leaned forward slightly. Want to try again? Silence stretched through the throne room. I watched Brennan's expression shift, calculation flickering behind his eyes as he weighed his options. Even if I had something to do with the boy's little adventure, he said carefully. No real harm was done. He was found. He's safe. Surely that warrants mercy rather than... Mercy? Alex's voice was soft, deadly. You want me to show you mercy? You, who terrorized my 7-year-old son, who told him he was worthless, who left him in darkness to suffer. He stood, and even from the gallery I could feel the power radiating from him. Tell me, Lord Brennan, why did you do it? I don't. The truth. Alex descended the steps toward where Brennan knelt. I'll know if you're lying, and if you lie to me now, your punishment will be far worse than anything you're imagining. Brennan stared up at the king, and I saw the moment he realized he'd lost. That whatever game he'd been playing was over. Because you're weak, he said. And there was venom in his voice now. Because you favor humans over your own kind. Because you keep that girl here, flaunting her in our faces, treating her like she's worthy of... He stopped himself, but the damage was done. Like she's worthy of what? Alex's voice was dangerously quiet. Of your attention, your protection. Your Brennan's lip curled. Everyone knows what she is to you. Everyone sees how you look at her, how you indulge her presence, how you let her corrupt your son with her human sympathies. You're making us all weak. Making the kingdom vulnerable. And I thought if the boy learned early what happens to those who can't shift, who can't protect themselves. Enough. Alex's command cracked through the room like a whip. You hurt my son to punish me for caring about a human woman. That's what this was about. Petty cruelty disguised as political ideology. It's not petty to preserve our way of life, to protect our superiority. Brennan was on his feet now, despite the guards' attempts to restrain him. Your father would be ashamed of what you've become. Soft. Compromised. Led around by your... Alex moved faster than should have been possible, his hand closing around Brennan's throat, lifting him off the ground. For a moment, I thought he might actually kill him, might let his rage overcome his control. But then Theron's small voice cut through the tension. Papa, don't. Alex froze, turned his head to look at his son. He's not worth it, Theron said quietly. Catherine told me that cruel people hurt others to feel powerful. If you hurt him now, you're just proving he can make you cruel too. The wisdom in those words, wisdom beyond Theron's years, seemed to cut through Alex's rage. He dropped Brennan, who collapsed, gasping to the floor. You're right, Alex said to his son, his voice rough. Then he turned to face the assembled witnesses. Lord Brennan has confessed to conspiracy to harm the Crown Prince, motivated by prejudice and political grievance. The penalty for such crimes is clear. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle. However, my son has reminded me that justice should not be confused with vengeance. Therefore, Lord Brennan, you are hereby stripped of your titles, your lands, and your position at court. You are banished from this kingdom permanently. If you are found within our borders after sunset tomorrow, you will be executed without trial. Alex's golden eyes were cold as ice. Be grateful my son is more merciful than I am. Brennan was dragged away, still sputtering protests, and Alex returned to the throne. He looked exhausted suddenly, the weight of leadership pressing down on his shoulders. Let this be understood by all present, he said, his voice carrying through the throne room. I will not tolerate attacks on those under my protection. I will not accept prejudice disguised as policy, and I will not compromise on the fundamental truth that worth is not determined by the ability to shift, but by the courage to act with honor. His eyes swept the assembled nobles. If anyone else has concerns about my choices, I invite you to voice them openly, in this room, to my face, rather than taking out your cowardice on a child. Silence answered him. Uncomfortable, tense silence. Dismissed, Alex said. The throne room emptied slowly, nobles whispering behind their hands, guards exchanging glances. I moved to leave with the others, but a voice stopped me. Catherine. Stay. I turned to find Alex descending from the throne, Theron still at his side. You all should rest, I said. This has been... Please, Alex interrupted. Just... stay. For a moment. So I waited while the last of the witnesses departed, until it was just the three of us in the vast throne room. Alex sank down onto the steps leading to the throne, suddenly looking less like a king, and more like a man who'd come dangerously close to losing everything that mattered. Papa did good, Theron said, sitting beside him. He was scary but fair. Thank you, Alex said, pulling his son close. Though I think you were the wise one, reminding me not to let anger rule my actions. Catherine taught me that. She says the best revenge is being better than the people who hurt you. Alex's eyes found mine. Did she? Something like that, I said quietly. Come here, Alex said. Please. I moved closer, climbing the steps until I stood before them. Alex reached out and took my hand, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. You saved my son twice now, he said. Risked your life both times without hesitation. And today you were proven right. Your presence here does make you a target. Makes Theron a target by association. His voice roughened. I've been selfish, keeping you here because I wanted you near, without fully considering the danger it puts you in. My heart sank. This was it. He was going to send me away after all. So I'm giving you a choice, he continued. The choice I should have given you weeks ago. You can leave. I'll provide you with gold enough to start a new life anywhere you want. Protection until you're safely settled. Letters of recommendation if you need them. You'll be free of this place, free of the danger, free of the scrutiny and gossip. And if I choose to stay? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Then you stay knowing exactly what it means. That there will be more Lord Brennans, more people who see you as a weakness, a corruption, something to be eliminated. That you'll be caught in political machinations you never asked for. That your association with me and with Theron will make your life harder in ways I can't fully protect you from. But you want me to stay. I said it as a statement, not a question. More than I should. His honesty was raw, painful. But this has to be your choice, Catherine. Freely made. Without pressure or debt or obligation. I won't keep you prisoner anymore. Even if losing you. He stopped, swallowed hard. Even if it costs me. Theron looked between us, his young face serious. I want you to stay too. But Papa's right, it has to be your choice. I looked at them both, the king who'd confessed he cared for me, despite every reason not to, the prince who'd called me his friend and meant it. I thought about Lord Brennan's words, about the accusations and the gossip and the very real danger of being associated with the royal family as a human, and then I thought about the alternative. Going back to the tavern, to scrubbing floors and being invisible, to a life where I was safe because I was insignificant. Ask me your riddle again, I said to Alex. The one from that night. Understanding flickered in his eyes. What begins with fear, survives on faith, and ends with either freedom or ruin? Love, I said quietly. It begins with fear of being hurt, of being rejected, of not being enough. It survives on faith that the other person will see you, truly see you, and choose you anyway. And it ends with either the freedom of being fully known and accepted, or the ruin of losing yourself completely. Alex's hand tightened on mine. And your answer? I'm already afraid. Already ruined, probably, because I can't imagine going back to a life where you and Theron aren't in it. I took a shaky breath. So if I'm going to be afraid and ruined anyway, I'd rather be those things here, with you, with both of you. That's not a sensible choice, Alex said, but his eyes were bright. I've never claimed to be sensible. I jumped into a river, remember? You did. He stood, still holding my hand, and pulled me closer. And then you jumped into darkness to save him again. And now you're choosing to jump into this, into whatever this is between us, knowing it could destroy you. Or, it could be the first real choice I've ever made, I said. The first time I've chosen something for myself instead of just surviving. He raised his free hand to my face, cupping my cheek the way he had that night in his chambers. I can't promise it will be easy. I don't want easy. I want real. Even if real means facing people like Lord Brennan, constant scrutiny, never quite belonging anywhere. I've never belonged anywhere, I said. At least here, I'd be not belonging with people who matter to me. Something in his expression cracked, and he pulled me against him, his arms wrapping around me with a fierceness that spoke of relief and fear and desperate hope all tangled together. I don't deserve this, he murmured against my hair. Don't deserve you. Probably not, I agreed, and felt him laugh despite everything. But I'm choosing you anyway. Papa? Theron's voice was tentative. Does this mean Catherine is staying? Forever? Alex pulled back slightly to look at his son. If she wants to. Yes, good. Theron stood and wrapped his arms around both of us, creating an awkward three-person embrace that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. Because I love her. And I think you do too, even if you haven't said it yet because you're scared. Out of the mouths of children, I thought, feeling tears prick my eyes. He's not wrong, Alex said quietly, his eyes locked on mine. I am scared. Terrified, actually. But he's also not wrong about the other part. He didn't say the words. Not yet. But I saw them in his eyes, in the way he held me, in the choice he was making to let me stay despite the danger, and I realized that was enough. For now, it was enough. Come on, I said, pulling back and taking both their hands. We should get Theron to bed. He's had a long day. We all have, Alex agreed. But he didn't let go of my hand as we walked through the palace, back to his private chambers where this had all begun weeks ago, where I'd first learned that riddles could be promises. And promises, if you were brave enough, could become something like freedom. Chapter 8. The Council's Demand. 3 months passed. 3 months of dinners in Alex's chambers, of afternoons teaching Theron about stories and histories, of evenings spent in the library, where Alex would find me and we'd talk until the candles burned low. 3 months of carefully stolen moments, his hand brushing mine, my fingers touching his arm, conversations that said everything without saying anything at all. 3 months of falling deeper into something that felt inevitable and terrifying in equal measure. The palace had settled into an uneasy acceptance of my presence. The servants were warmer now, some even friendly. The guards nodded when I passed. I'd found a place here, precarious as it was. But the nobles, they were a different matter. Lord Brennan's banishment had sent ripples through the court. Some saw it as justice served. Others saw it as proof that the king valued a human over his own people. The whispers continued, more careful now but no less persistent. And then, the Northern Council demanded an audience. I learned of it from Margot, who came to my quarters one morning with an expression that told me nothing good was coming. "The king has been summoned to address the Northern Council," she said, setting down a breakfast tray I hadn't asked for. "They're arriving today. All 7 houses." My stomach dropped. "Why?" "Officially. To discuss trade agreements and border disputes." Margot's voice was careful. "Unofficially. To pressure him about you. Me. You're becoming a symbol, girl. Whether you intended to or not." She sat down across from me, abandoning pretense. "The conservative houses see you as everything wrong with the king's policies. They're going to demand he send you away. And if he refuses..." "What?" "They'll threaten to withdraw their support, maybe even suggest he's unfit to rule." She met my eyes. "This isn't just about you anymore. It's about the future of the kingdom." I stared at the untouched breakfast, my appetite gone. Then he should send me away. I never wanted to be a political crisis. "That's not your choice to make." Margot's voice was surprisingly gentle. "The king has made his position clear. You're under his protection. The question is what you'll do when the council tries to force his hand." The Northern Council arrived that afternoon in a parade of carriages and armed guards. 7 lords and ladies representing the most powerful families in the kingdom, each one radiating the kind of authority that came from generations of privilege. I watched from my window as they were escorted into the palace, their fine clothes and haughty expressions making my chest tight with anxiety. Alex had sent word that I should stay in my quarters during the council meeting. "For my safety," he said. But I knew it was also to avoid provocation. My presence would only inflame tensions. So I waited. Paced, tried to read, and failed. Watched the sun move across the sky, and wondered what was happening in that council chamber. Hours passed. Afternoon bled into evening. Still no word. When the knock finally came, I jumped. But it wasn't a messenger, it was Alex himself, looking exhausted and furious in equal measure. "What happened?" I asked as soon as the door closed behind him. "They want you gone." He moved to the window, staring out at the darkening gardens. They presented it as a formal demand. 7 houses, united. Send the human away or face a vote of no confidence. My blood ran cold. A vote of no confidence that could remove you from the throne. It could, if they get enough support from the other houses. He turned to face me. "They're calling an assembly, 2 weeks from now. Every noble house will vote on whether I'm fit to continue ruling. Because of me. Because I refuse to bow to their prejudice." His voice was tight, with barely controlled anger. "They're using you as a symbol of everything they hate about my policies. But this isn't really about you, Catherine. It's about power. About maintaining the old hierarchies. If I give in to this, if I send you away to appease them, they'll know they can control me. That any time they disagree with my decisions, they can threaten, and I'll fold. But if I don't, I could lose everything. The throne, my ability to protect Theron, any chance of actually changing this kingdom for the better." He scrubbed a hand over his face. "They've backed me into a corner, and they know it." I moved closer to him, my heart breaking at the weight he was carrying. "Then let me go. I'll leave tonight, quietly, before the assembly. You can tell them I chose to leave on my own. That way you don't give in to their demands. But I'm also not here to be used against you. No." The word was immediate, fierce. "I won't let you sacrifice yourself to save me. It's not a sacrifice if I'm choosing it, isn't it?" He closed the distance between us, his hands coming up to frame my face. "You'd be giving up everything you found here. The library, Theron, a place where you're valued and safe. I'd be giving up you. I interrupted quietly. That's what I'd really be losing. His eyes closed briefly, pain flickering across his features. Don't make this harder than it already is. Alex, listen to me. I covered his hands with mine. You've spent 3 months trying to protect me. Let me protect you now. Let me make the choice that gives you the best chance of keeping your throne, of being there for Theron, of continuing the work you believe in. And what about what I believe in when it comes to you? His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. What about the fact that in 3 months you've become essential to me? That I can't imagine going back to a life where you're not in it? My breath caught. We'd danced around this for months, acknowledged the pull between us without naming it. But now, with everything falling apart, the careful distance we'd maintained felt impossible to keep. I love you, he said, the words tumbling out rough and desperate. I've been trying not to. Trying to maintain some kind of appropriate distance, to protect you from exactly this kind of situation. But I can't anymore. I love you, and the thought of losing you, of letting them drive you away, it's unbearable. Tears blurred my vision. I love you too, which is why I can't let you throw away your kingdom for me. It's not your choice. It's not yours either, not alone. I pulled his hands from my face, held them tight. This has to be something we decide together, both of us, with clear eyes, understanding what we're risking. He stared at me, conflict warring in his expression. Then, slowly, he nodded. Together. You're right. He pulled me into his arms, holding me like I might disappear. I need time to think, to figure out if there's a way through this that doesn't end with me losing everything that matters. We stood there in the gathering dark, holding each other while the kingdom threatened to tear us apart. The next days were tense with waiting. Alex was in constant meetings, trying to shore up support among the moderate houses, negotiating with nobles who might be convinced to vote against the Northern Council's motion. I barely saw him, except in passing a hand squeeze in the corridor. A stolen moment in the library where he looked so exhausted I wanted to weep. Theron sensed something was wrong. He grew quieter, more clingy, asking questions I didn't know how to answer. Are they going to make you leave? He asked one afternoon in the library. I couldn't lie to him. They're trying to. Because you're human. Yes. His small face crumpled with anger. That's not fair. You're good and brave and you make Papa happy. Why does it matter that you can't shift? Because some people believe that the ability to shift makes you better, more worthy. I pulled him into a hug. But your father is trying to change that. He's fighting for a kingdom where everyone has value, regardless of what form they take. Will he win? I don't know, sweetheart. I hope so. Me too. Theron pulled back, his golden eyes serious beyond his years. Because if they make you leave, Papa will be sad forever. And I'll be sad too. And that's not fair either. No, I thought. It wasn't fair at all. 2 days before the assembly, Alex found me in the gardens at twilight. I have a plan, he said without preamble. It's risky. Possibly insane. But it might work. Tell me. The Northern Council's strongest argument is that my attachment to you clouds my judgment. That I'm choosing personal desire over the good of the kingdom. He took my hands. But what if I could prove that my feelings for you actually make me a better ruler? That having someone who challenges me, who sees beyond the crown to the man underneath, makes me more capable, not less. How would you prove that? By making you my wife. The world tilted. What? Marry me. Publicly. Before the assembly. Make you not just someone I'm protecting, but the queen consort. Someone with actual political standing, whose presence at my side is a choice I'm making for the kingdom, not in spite of it. I stared at him, my mind reeling. Alex, that would cause even more outrage. A human queen. That's never been done. Exactly. His eyes were bright with desperate hope. It's unprecedented. Bold. It makes a statement about what kind of kingdom we're going to be, and it removes the argument that you're just a distraction or a weakness. You'd be my partner, my equal, someone I chose to help me rule. The council would never accept it. They don't have to accept it. They just have to recognize that it's within my rights as king. And once we're married, they can't demand I send you away without essentially demanding I dissolve my own marriage, which would be an even bigger scandal than a human queen. He pulled me closer. It's a gamble. It might backfire spectacularly, but it's the only move I can see that doesn't end with me losing you. My heart was hammering so hard I could barely think. This isn't how proposals are supposed to go. I know. And you deserve better, deserve romance and time and a choice that isn't made under pressure. His voice roughened. But I'm asking anyway. Not just as a political strategy, though that's part of it, but because I want you as my wife. Want to wake up next to you every morning, face whatever comes with you at my side, build a life and a kingdom that's worthy of the faith you've shown in me. Alex. You can say no, he interrupted. If this is too much, too fast, too dangerous, I'll understand. I'll find another way. Even if it means... He stopped, swallowed hard. Even if it means letting you go. I looked at him, this king, who'd kept me here against my will, and then given me the freedom to choose. Who'd shown me that power could be gentle, and strength could be vulnerable. Who'd made me believe that maybe, just maybe, I was worth loving. Ask me the question, I said. Properly. Not as a king making a political maneuver. As the man I love asking me to share his life. Understanding dawned in his eyes. He dropped to one knee right there in the garden, still holding my hands, looking up at me with such raw emotion that I could barely breathe. Catherine, he said, his voice steady despite everything. Will you marry me? Will you stand beside me as my wife, my partner, my equal? Will you help me build a kingdom where love matters more than bloodlines? Where courage counts more than the ability to shift? Where people like you, brave and brilliant and impossibly kind, are valued as they should be? Tears streamed down my face. That's a lot to ask. I know. But I'm asking anyway. I thought about everything that had led to this moment. The river and the drowning child. The palace that had been a cage until it became a home. The riddles and the stolen moments and the slow, terrifying process of letting someone see all of me and choosing to stay anyway. I thought about Theron, who'd called me his friend and meant it. About the library filled with books I'd never imagined having access to. About dinners where I was treated like I mattered, not despite being human but simply because I was myself. And I thought about Alex, complicated, brilliant, fierce Alex who'd kept me here out of need and let me stay out of love. Yes, I said, my voice breaking on the word. Yes, I'll marry you. He stood and kissed me, deep and desperate, like he was afraid I might disappear if he let go. I kissed him back, tasting salt from tears I couldn't tell were his or mine, feeling like I was falling and flying all at once. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. 2 days, he said. The assembly is in 2 days. We'll announce our engagement then. Are you ready for what comes next? No, I admitted, but I'm ready to face it with you. That's all I can ask. He pulled back, his hands coming up to cup my face. I love you. Whatever happens, whatever they say or do, I love you. Remember that. I will. I covered his hands with mine. I love you too. And we're going to fight for this. Together. Together, he echoed, and sealed it with another kiss. The day of the assembly arrived gray and cold. The sky threatening rain. I dressed in the finest gown I'd ever worn, dark blue silk that Alex had commissioned, embroidered with silver thread in patterns that resembled stars. My hair was arranged simply but elegantly, and around my neck I wore a pendant. Alex had given me the night before, a wolf and a star intertwined, symbolizing our union. You look like a queen, Margot said, her eyes suspiciously bright. I feel like I'm going to be sick, I admitted. That's normal. But you'll be fine. The king loves you. Prince Theron adores you. And you're braver than you think. She squeezed my shoulder. Now go show those pompous nobles what courage really looks like. The great hall was packed when I arrived. Every noble house in the kingdom had sent representatives, filling the tiered seating that surrounded the central floor. I could feel their eyes on me as I was escorted to a seat near the front, whispers following in my wake like smoke. Alex stood at the center of the floor in full royal regalia, Theron beside him. When our eyes met, he gave me a small nod. Courage, that nod said. We can do this. The head of the Northern Council, Lady Morgaine, A woman whose silver hair and sharp features spoke of decades of political maneuvering stood to address the assembly. "We are gathered here to address a matter of grave importance to the kingdom," she began, her voice carrying through the hall. "The fitness of our king to rule." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "King Alex has shown many admirable qualities during his reign," Lady Morgane continued. "But recently, his judgment has been called into question. Specifically, his decision to harbor a human woman in the palace, to give her access to the crown prince, to elevate her above her station." Her eyes found me in the crowd. "This woman, Catherine, represents a dangerous precedent. If the king can be swayed by personal attachment to make unwise decisions, what does that say about his ability to rule objectively?" Other nobles stood to echo her concerns. How my presence undermined shifter superiority. How Alex's policies favoring humans threatened their way of life. How a king who couldn't maintain proper boundaries wasn't fit to lead. I sat through it all, my hands clenched in my lap, fighting the urge to run. This was worse than I'd imagined, not just prejudice, but genuine fear that everything they believed about the world was being threatened. Finally, Alex raised his hand for silence. "I've heard your concerns," he said, his voice calm but carrying absolute authority. "And I understand them. Change is frightening. Challenging long-held beliefs is uncomfortable. But leadership isn't about maintaining comfort. It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard." He moved closer to where the council members stood. "You accuse me of letting personal attachment cloud my judgment. You claim that my feelings for Catherine make me unfit to rule." His eyes swept the assembly. "But I would argue the opposite. Having someone in my life who challenges me, who isn't afraid to speak truth even when it's uncomfortable, who reminds me that my decisions affect real people with real lives, that makes me a better king, not a worse one." "Pretty words," Lady Morgane said coldly, "but words don't change the fact that she's human. She has no business being elevated to such a position." "Which is why," Alex said, and I saw the tension in his shoulders, "I'm giving her the position she deserves. Catherine isn't just someone I'm protecting. She's the woman I love, and in 1 week's time, she will become my wife, your queen." The hall erupted in chaos. Nobles were on their feet, shouting over each other. Some in outrage, some in shock. A few blessed them in what sounded like approval. The noise was deafening. Lady Morgane's face had gone white with fury. "You cannot be serious. A human queen? That's an abomination." "It's unprecedented," Alex corrected. "But not illegal, not prohibited by any law or custom, and it's my choice as king to make. It's an insult to every shifter in this kingdom. It's a declaration that this kingdom values character over bloodlines." Alex's voice rose over the commotion. "That we measure worth by courage and compassion, not by the ability to shift. And if that offends you, Lady Morgane, then perhaps you need to examine why the idea of a human having value threatens you so deeply." The hall went quiet at that shocked silence at the king's directness. "This is madness," another council member said. "The people will never accept it. Then I'll help them learn to accept it." Alex turned to face the entire assembly. "I'm not asking for your permission. I'm informing you of my decision. Catherine will be my wife, my queen, my partner in ruling this kingdom. You can choose to support us, or you can choose to stand against us. But I will not be moved on this." "Then you leave us no choice," Lady Morgane said coldly. "We call for a vote. Now, all in favor of declaring King Alex unfit to rule, stand and be counted." My heart stopped. This was it. The moment that would determine everything. 7 nobles stood immediately the Northern Council, united in their opposition. Then, 3 more. 5 more. I counted silently, watching noble after noble rise to their feet in judgment of the man I loved. 23 total. Nearly half the assembly. But that meant nearly half remained seated. And you needed 2/3 majority to remove a king. Lady Morgane's face tightened as she realized the vote had failed. "This isn't over," she said. "We will not stand by and watch you destroy everything our ancestors built." "No," Alex agreed. "It's not over, it's just beginning. The kingdom you want to preserve is already dying. I'm trying to build something better. Something worthy of all our people, not just those born with certain abilities. He paused. You can help me build it, or you can fight me. But either way, the change is coming. He turned then, his eyes finding mine in the crowd, and held out his hand. I stood on shaking legs and walked down to the floor, every eye in the hall on me. When I reached him, he took my hand and pulled me close to his side. This is Catherine, he said to the assembly. In 1 week, she will be your queen. I suggest you get used to the idea. And then, in front of everyone, nobles and guards and witnesses who would carry this story to every corner of the kingdom, he kissed me. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was claiming, declaring, a statement that couldn't be misunderstood. When he pulled back, I was dizzy, and the hall was in chaos again. Come on, he murmured against my ear. Let's get out of here before they start throwing things. He led me from the hall, Theron running to join us, and we escaped into the private corridors while behind us, the assembly descended into furious debate. Did we just start a civil war? I asked breathlessly. Possibly, Alex admitted. But at least we started it together. Is that supposed to be romantic? A little bit. Despite everything, I laughed. And he laughed too, and Theron joined in, and for a moment we were just 3 people who loved each other, facing an uncertain future but facing it as a family. Whatever came next, riots or acceptance, triumph or ruin, at least we'd chosen it freely. At least we'd chosen each other. And that, I was learning, was its own kind of victory. Epilogue. The promise kept. 1 year later. The chambers were quiet in the early morning light, that stolen hour before the palace fully woke. And duty called us back to the endless work of ruling a kingdom in transition. I lay in bed, watching Alex sleep beside me, his face relaxed in a way it never was during waking hours. Even in sleep, his hand was curled around mine, as if he needed the physical reminder that I was still here, still real, still his. The wedding had happened as promised, 1 week after the assembly. It had been smaller than a royal wedding should have been. Many of the noble houses had boycotted in protest. But the ones who came had come with genuine support, and the common people who'd lined the streets had cheered with a fervor that had brought tears to my eyes. The years since had been hard, harder than either of us had anticipated. 3 noble houses had withdrawn from court entirely, taking their resources and influence with them. There had been protests in the northern territories, calls for Alex to abdicate, whispers of rebellion that kept his military advisors up at night. But there had been victories too. New laws protecting human workers, educational reforms allowing human children access to schools previously reserved for shifters, trade agreements with kingdoms that had been watching Alex's progressive policies with interest, and slowly, grudgingly, some acceptance. Not from everyone, never from everyone, but from enough people that the tide was starting to turn. Alex's eyes opened, finding me watching him, and a smile curved his lips. Good morning, my queen. Good morning, my king. I traced the line of his jaw. Did you sleep well? Better than I have in weeks. He pulled me closer, burying his face in my hair. The trade summit went well yesterday. 3 more kingdoms agreed to recognize our marriage. That's progress. It is. He pulled back to look at me. Though Lady Morgaine sent another letter, the Northern Council is still demanding I annul the marriage. Still? After a year? They're persistent, I'll give them that. He brushed a strand of hair from my face. I sent back my usual response, which is a polite suggestion that they focus their energy on something more productive, though perhaps slightly less polite than that. I laughed despite myself. You're going to give yourself an ulcer with all this stress. Probably, but at least I'll have you to nurse me through it. Such romantic talk from the Alphaking. I'm full of romance. Just ask Theron, he complains constantly about how sappy I've become. It was true. Theron had grown so much in the past year, shooting up in height and finally beginning to show signs of his wolf emerging. He was still my little friend, still came to the library for stories. But he was also becoming the heir the kingdom needed, brave and thoughtful and remarkably unbothered by the politics swirling around his family. Speaking of Theron, I said, his tutors say he's been asking about succession laws, specifically about whether his future spouse would have to be a shifter. Alex groaned. He's 9 years old. Why is he already thinking about spouses? Because he's watching us, learning what's possible. I poked his chest gently. You started a revolution, remember? You can't be surprised when your son wants to continue it. I suppose not. He captured my hand, brought it to his lips. Do you regret it? Any of this? Regret marrying you? Never. I paused. Though I do sometimes miss when people weren't analyzing my every move for political implications. Last week someone wrote a treatise about the symbolism of me wearing blue to the harvest festival. What was the conclusion? That I was either subtly supporting the maritime territories or making a statement about human melancholy. The author couldn't decide which. People have too much time on their hands. People are trying to understand a world that's changing faster than they're comfortable with. We're the face of that change. I shifted to prop myself up on one elbow. But you asked if I regret it. I don't. Even with the scrutiny and the politics and Lady Morgaine's monthly letters demanding my banishment. Monthly? I thought she was down to quarterly. She sent an extra one last week. Apparently, my appearance at the literacy initiative was an affront to proper governance. Alex's expression darkened. She can write all the letters she wants, I interrupted. It doesn't change anything. I'm here. I'm your wife. I'm the queen, whether she likes it or not. I traced patterns on his chest. And more importantly, I'm happy. Are you? Deliriously. He rolled to pin me beneath him, his weight comfortable and familiar. Even when the kingdom is in chaos and half the nobles hate me and I spend most of my time in meetings trying to hold everything together. He kissed me softly. Even then, I come back here to you, and everything makes sense. That's the lack of sleep talking. That's the truth talking. He kissed me again. Deeper this time. I love you. More than I thought possible. You saved my son's life. And then you saved mine. I just jumped into a river. You jumped into so much more than that. His voice went rough. You jumped into a life that wasn't easy, into a position you never wanted, into loving someone who came with more baggage than any person should have to handle. And you never flinched. Never backed down. Even when it would have been easier to leave. Where else would I go? I asked softly. You're my home now. You and Theron. This impossible life we've built together. He buried his face in my neck, and I felt his shoulders shake with something that might have been laughter or tears or both. We lay there for a while, tangled together, until a knock at the door interrupted us. Papa. Catherine, are you awake? Theron's voice came through the wood. The council's here early. They say it's urgent. Alex sighed against my skin. Of course they do. He raised his voice. Give us 10 minutes, Theron. Okay. Footsteps retreated, and Alex pulled back reluctantly. Duty calls, he said. When doesn't it? We dressed quickly, falling into the routine we'd developed over the past year. He helped me with my laces. I straightened his collar. Small intimacies that grounded us before facing whatever crisis the day would bring. Before we left the chamber, he caught my hand. Wait, I have something for you. He moved to his desk and pulled out a small wooden box I'd never seen before. When he opened it, inside was a carved wolf figurine, its detail exquisite, its eyes inlaid with tiny amber stones. Theron made it, Alex explained. Well, mostly made it. I helped with the fine details. He wanted you to have it for your collection. My collection? He's been making you one. Every wolf represents a month we've been married. This is number 12. Alex's smile was tender. He's keeping them in his room, until he has enough to give you all at once. But he finished this one last night, and insisted I show you. Tears blurred my vision. He's been doing this all year? All year. Because you're family now, and family deserves wolf collections. I clutched the figurine, overwhelmed by the simple, profound gesture. I love him so much. I know, he loves you too. Alex pulled me close. We both do. Another knock, more insistent this time. Coming, Alex called, then, quietly to me. Ready? No. But let's go anyway. We left the chambers hand in hand, the wooden wolf tucked safely in my pocket, and headed toward whatever crisis awaited us. The council meeting was about border tensions, the usual political maneuvering, nothing catastrophic. Alex navigated it with the practiced ease of someone who'd been doing this his entire life. And I sat beside him, offering insights when asked, mostly just being present. Being seen, that was still the most powerful thing I did. Margot had told me once. Just existing in this space. Being the queen. Showing everyone that it was possible. After the meeting, Theron found us in the corridor. "Did you show her?" he asked Alex eagerly. "I did. Did you like it?" Theron turned those golden eyes on me, so much like his father's, full of hope. I knelt down to his level. "I loved it. It's beautiful. You're very talented." He beamed. "I have 8 more at home. Well, in my room. Which is home. You know what I mean." "I do." I pulled him into a hug. "Thank you, sweetheart, for making them for me, for including me in your collection. You're my family," he said simply. "Of course you get wolves." Such simple logic. Such profound acceptance. When he ran off to his afternoon lessons, Alex and I walked through the palace toward the gardens. It had become our habit on days when the weather was good, stealing a few minutes of peace before the next obligation. We found our usual bench, tucked away among flowering bushes that were just beginning to bloom with spring. "Do you remember the first time we sat here?" Alex asked. "When I asked you that riddle, what begins with fear, survives on faith, and ends with either freedom or ruin?" I recited. "Of course I remember. You said the answer was love." "It was. It is." He was quiet for a moment, his thumb tracing circles on the back of my hand. "Did we end with freedom or ruin?" I thought about the question. About the year we'd survived, the battles we'd fought, the love we'd built in the midst of chaos. "Both," I said finally. "We're free in ways that matter, free to choose each other, to love openly, to build the life we want rather than the one expected of us. But we're also ruined in the best possible way, ruined for anything less than this, for any love that's safer or easier or more convenient. Ruined for anyone but each other," he agreed. "Exactly." He pulled something from his pocket, a folded piece of paper, worn at the edges as if it had been read many times. "What's that?" "Something I wrote the night before our wedding. When I couldn't sleep, because I was terrified you'd change your mind." He unfolded it carefully. "It's a riddle, one I never gave you because I was afraid of the answer. And now I think I'm ready to hear it." He handed me the paper. I read the words written in his careful script. What starts as debt but becomes choice. What begins in silence but demands a voice. What's given freely yet binds forever. What breaks under pressure but never severs. I looked up at him, my throat tight. "The answer is a promise." "Yes." His eyes held mine. "The promise I made when I asked you to stay. The promise you made when you said yes. The promises we've kept every day since, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. A promise can be broken," I said softly. "But ours hasn't been. Won't be." He took the paper back and tucked it away. "That's what I want you to know. That every day, I choose this. Choose you. Choose us. Not because of debt or obligation or political necessity, but because I love you. Because you're essential to who I am now. Will you marry me?" I asked suddenly, and he blinked in confusion. "We're already married." "I know, but I want to keep choosing you. Every day. Forever." I took his hands. "So, will you marry me? Again and again, every morning, in all the ways that matter?" Understanding dawned, followed by that rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. "Yes," he said, "every day, every morning, for as long as we both live. Even when the Northern Council sends their monthly letters? Especially then. Even when the kingdom is in chaos? The kingdom is always in chaos, that's not going to change. Even when I'm impossible and stubborn and making your life more complicated? You are all those things, and I love you more for it." He pulled me close, his forehead resting against mine. "So yes, I'll marry you. Again and again. Because you're the best choice I ever made." We sat there in the garden where this had all begun, where he'd first asked me a riddle, and I'd learned that promises could be kept, that love could be both terrifying and safe, that jumping into the unknown could lead somewhere worth staying. In the distance, I could hear the sounds of the palace waking, fully guards changing shifts, servants beginning their work, the endless machinery of governing a kingdom that was slowly, painfully, learning to change. But here, in this moment, it was just us. Just a king and a queen who'd chosen each other against all wisdom. Just two people who'd learned that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was love someone when the world told you not to. Just a promise, kept every day, in all the ways that mattered. "Come on," Alex said finally, standing and pulling me up with him. "Theron wanted to show you something in the training yards. Something about a new combat technique he's learning. Will there be dramatic demonstrations?" "Undoubtedly. He's 9. Everything is dramatic." I laughed and let him lead me through the gardens, our hands clasped tight, toward whatever came next, because that was what we did now. We faced it together. We kept our promises, and we loved each other through the chaos, through the fear, through every impossible challenge a kingdom in transition could throw at us. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined when I jumped into that river a year and a half ago. It was better. It was real. It was ours. And in the end, that was the only answer that mattered. Did you love this story? If Catherine and Alex's journey touched your heart, you need to read this book titled Rejected by the Alpha, My Enemies to Lovers Glow-Up Revenge Romance that takes forbidden love to the next level. A rejected heroine who rises from the ashes, an alpha who realizes too late what he's lost. Revenge, redemption, and a love that rewrites destiny. Get your copy now. Link in description.